Our first encounter happened on an Alaska highway. The second time around, we tumbled headlong into love. This time, I was putting an end to our marriage. And in this place, I would whisper my final farewell to the world. The day the doctors told me I had late-stage stomach cancer, I picked up my phone at the airport terminal and called Declan. Declan, I'm agreeing to the divorce. I don't want a thing. My one condition is that you travel with me to Alaska one last time, so we can walk the same paths we once walked when love still held us together. A long silence stretched between us before his guarded voice finally broke through. Clara, what exactly are you planning? My thoughts drifted briefly, a wave of bitterness swelling in my chest. 8 years earlier, we had been devoted to each other. Now we could hardly stand to be in the same room. I'm at the security checkpoint in Terminal A, waiting for you, I told him. Bring the divorce papers along. The flight departs in 3 hours. This is your only window to get my signature. Miss it, and the offer vanishes. I ended the call, then crumpled the test result, my death sentence, and threw it in the nearest trash can. Pulling out my sunglasses, I slid them on to conceal my red, swollen eyes. Late-stage stomach cancer. Perhaps this was karma for being such a crazy woman. 2 years ago, my cousin Camille Lawson joined Declan's company, and after that, he started working late more nights than not. It began with an offhand remark, "Your cousin is pretty interesting." Before long, he couldn't get through a single day without bringing her up. I fought back, raged, even severed ties with my aunt's entire family, all for nothing. Camille earned a promotion and became Declan's personal assistant. And then Declan handed me a divorce agreement. 3 days ago, the 8th revision of those papers landed in my hands. I snapped completely, tearing through our house, sobbing, screaming at him. Declan, you swore you'd love only me forever. Now that you've found someone younger and prettier, you think you can break your word and toss me aside? Not a chance. I refuse to make way for her. You're going to stay, and you're going to suffer alongside me until the bitter end. You'll never be free of me. Then fate delivered its own blow, leaving me with barely a month to live. So I chose to let go. If I couldn't chain him to me for another 70 years, I would hold on for 7 more days. Declan showed up at the airport not long after, wheeling a suitcase I had never seen before. Camille had probably thrown it together at the last minute. The instant he spotted me, he charged over and began scolding without a moment's hesitation. Clara, do you always have to act on impulse? Do you realize how much trouble it caused to cancel my meetings at the last minute? When are you going to start being reasonable? All that inconvenience, and still he came, desperate for the divorce. My heart ached, but behind my sunglasses, I hid every trace of it and folded my arms with practiced indifference. Reasonable has never been my style. You knew that. I fired back. You used to adore this wild, impulsive side of me. You didn't have to come. I'm perfectly content staying married and tormenting you for the next 70 years. I wanted nothing more than a calm conversation, but 2 years of war had turned us into sworn enemies. I couldn't even recall how to speak to him without venom. Declan pressed his lips into a tight line, as though I were the most exasperating person alive. After a few steadying breaths, he asked, "Fine. Then at least give me a reason. Why must we go to Alaska before the divorce?" I turned toward the tarmac, watching the planes to keep my voice from wavering. 8 years ago, you asked for my number on the Alaska highway. You said I was prettier than a columbine blooming on a high ridge. 7 years ago, we watched the golden sunrise paint Mount Foraker together. You told me you were in love with me and wanted to spend your life with me. 5 years ago, you brought me to the Alaska Native Heritage Center and got down on one knee. We made a wish together, promising that in this life dash. Stop. Declan cut me off abruptly. His brow creased, and he stood there looking down at me, his expression tangled with conflicting emotions. What's the purpose of dredging all this up? Is it just another ploy to stall the divorce? I met his gaze and offered a bitter smile. Can't you trust me just one more time? Have I ever broken a promise to you? My words only deepened the shadows on Declan's face. He fell silent for a moment, then glanced away, his voice stiff and uncomfortable. I'll come with you, but don't think nostalgia is going to change anything. Remind me of our love story all you want. This divorce is still happening. The smile froze on my lips for an instant before I nodded. I know. Just drive with me for 7 days, and I'll never trouble you again. Another stretch of silence passed before Declan's eyes drifted to the bag hanging from my shoulder. He frowned. You're heading to Alaska with nothing but that? That's absurd. We'll pick up whatever we need once we arrive. You'll have to ditch that suit anyway. Inside my bag were only the essential documents and a full set of makeup, armor to disguise the fact that I was dying. There was no reason to pack expensive clothes. I had no intention of coming back, after all. I would let my life blaze one final time in Alaska's thin mountain air, and then a devoted priest would perform a rare, ancient funeral ceremony on my behalf. I would leave nothing behind. Chapter 2. The plane lifted off quickly, and within a few hours we touched down in Anchorage. Altitude sickness had never been an issue for me, but the moment my feet hit the ground, a suffocating pressure clamped around me, and my stomach knotted with cramps. I rummaged through my bag, tapped 2 cancer pills into my palm, and swallowed them dry. Declan, who had been walking ahead, happened to glance back at that exact moment. He paused, surprised. What are those? I hesitated, about to explain, but he scoffed before I could. Those little antidepressant pills again? The sarcasm in his voice wrapped around my throat like an invisible fist, stealing my words. Years of relentless fighting had saddled me with severe depression. At my lowest point, I would stir the pills into ice cream and spoon them down, only to retch until I bled. None of it ever made Declan feel remorse. Not once did it make him regret. In his eyes, I was nothing more than a deranged woman faking depression for attention. So I tucked the pills back into my bag and answered casually, they're for altitude sickness. Maybe I was imagining things, but Declan seemed to relax slightly. He slowed his stride to match mine. I don't remember you ever getting altitude sickness. How did your health deteriorate so badly in just a few years? A few years. That was all it took for love to wither, for people who had sworn eternity to drift apart. Falling ill hardly seemed surprising by comparison. I gave no answer. I simply said, don't worry. I won't let it interfere with the trip. Declan frowned, but held his tongue. We rented a car and changed into something more practical. I shed my designer dress and heels, pulling on a simple long skirt and white flats. He swapped his tailored suit for a windbreaker and hiking boots. When our eyes met again, we both seemed momentarily lost. For a brief instant, it felt as though we had been transported back to the beginning, before he became a cold CEO and before life had battered me beyond recognition. We had been wild and free then, reckless with energy, loving each other without restraint. Declan regarded me with a flicker of emotion, as if words were forming on the tip of his tongue. A spark of hope kindled inside me. Then he said, that skirt suits you. Maybe pick one up for Camille, too. It was like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head, freezing me to the bone. He seemed to catch what he had just said. His brow furrowed, and he attempted to clarify. I stopped him. Don't bother explaining. If you want to buy her one, go right ahead. But something this cheap doesn't exactly fit your taste, Mr. Ashford. The last thing I wanted was another reminder of how precious Camille was to him. My tone cut deep, and Declan's expression immediately hardened. One slip of the tongue, and you jump on it? I'm here with you, isn't that enough? Can you stop creating a scene? His barrage of questions left me with nothing to say. Curious stares from passers-by felt like invisible slaps across my cheeks. I blinked away the burning behind my eyes, swallowed every feeling, and stayed quiet. Declan's voice softened after a beat. "All right, that was on me. Just calm down, okay?" He settled the bill and walked out with our things. Our first day in Alaska, and we had already parted in anger. I stood there a while longer, then made my way alone to downtown Anchorage. There is a private art gallery downtown where Declan and I once commissioned a painting from the owner, Gabriel Brennan, to commemorate our love. I never expected him to recognize me after all this time. "Ms. Whitmore, or should I say Mrs. Ashford? It's been ages. Are you here with Mr. Ashford?" I returned his smile. "It has been a long time. Just Ms. Whitmore, please. I've come to ask whether you could paint another picture for me." Gabriel looked taken aback, but he quickly recovered with a warm nod. "Of course. What did you have in mind?" Feeling the dull ache pulsing through my stomach, I paused for a moment and whispered, "My portrait for the funeral." Chapter 3. Gabriel stood frozen, staring at me as though he couldn't believe what he had heard. I shifted uncomfortably and said, "If you think it's bad luck, just pretend I never walked in." He cut me off at once. "No, it's an honor." His voice was quiet, his eyes lingering on my frame. A sudden pang of sadness washed over me. Even an old friend I hadn't seen in years could tell how much weight I had lost. Yet the man who shared my bed and my dreams had noticed nothing at all. Or perhaps he had and simply didn't care. I sent Gabriel my favorite photograph and arranged to collect the finished painting in 7 days, then headed back to the hotel. I had reserved the same hotel where Declan proposed to me years ago, going so far as to request the very same room. My hope had been that returning together might rekindle some memories. But arriving alone, the only thing to greet me was the soft glow of the ambient lights. Declan was already asleep. Disappointment settled over me, but then a plate of pasta on the table caught my attention. I stopped, my legs stiff, and walked over to find the plate full and still faintly steaming. The warmth rising from it blurred my vision with tears. He would still leave a plate of pasta out for me, but he would never again stay awake to share it. Maybe that was for the best. When I was gone, at least he wouldn't lose any sleep. I managed a few bites, but the pain in my stomach sent me stumbling to the bathroom, where I threw it all up. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I realized even layers of foundation couldn't mask how gaunt I had become. Exhaustion was all I felt. I had pictured this trip as something extraordinary, but my body was burning through its reserves far too quickly for anything grand. The next morning, I opened my eyes to find Declan sitting at the foot of the bed, watching me. For once, he offered an explanation unprompted. I was tied up in meetings all day yesterday, so by the time I got back, I was completely spent and...
Right.
The night before that, he hadn't come home at all. Camille had posted an Instagram photo of them out drinking together. I didn't bother arguing. I just mumbled an acknowledgement, climbed out of bed, and started getting ready. While I was applying foundation, Declan commented, "You look so pale lately. You never used to wear makeup in Alaska." My hand paused. "If you're trying to call me an old hag, just come out and say it." Declan blinked, caught completely off guard, then snapped back with irritation, muttering that I was impossible, unreasonable, a constant headache. After yet another round of bickering, we checked out, rented an SUV, and set out for Eklutna Lake. It is one of Anchorage's most iconic landmarks. 8 years earlier, after exchanging numbers on the Alaska Highway, we had run into each other again right there at Eklutna Lake. The wind had been fierce that day, the surface of the lake dazzling with light. I was busy taking photos with friends when he walked up and draped a thick shawl over my shoulders. Looking back, maybe it was that shawl that warmed me all the way through. We parked alongside the water, and just as I was about to step out, Declan's phone rang. He snatched it up, but not fast enough. I glimpsed Camille on the screen. I need to take this. His last word was swallowed by the slam of my car door. I climbed out, sensing his eyes on my back, but I simply pulled the shawl tighter and walked toward the shore alone. The wind was even fiercer than it had been years ago, yet sunlight poured across the water in brilliant shades of blue. Standing at the edge, I felt none of the excitement or wonder I once had, only a quiet, settling peace. I thought, if my soul lingered here after death, held by a lake this clear, maybe dying wouldn't be so terrifying after all. Watch out. A hand suddenly seized my arm. I turned to find two young women, their faces etched with concern. Miss, it looked like you were about to walk straight into the water. Are you all right? Only then did I realize how close I had come to stepping in. My pulse jumped, but their kindness touched me, and I shook my head.
I've fine.
Thank you. Noticing how lightly they were dressed, I unfolded my shawl and offered it to them. Don't catch cold. Good health is the best foundation for beauty. The words spilled out on their own, echoing something Declan had once told me, and for an instant I felt untethered from the present. One of the girls accepted the shawl, looking puzzled. But what about you? Before I could reply, the other one peered past my shoulder. Is that your husband? He's really handsome. I turned and saw Declan approaching with a jacket in hand. His voice carried on the wind, tinged with familiar exasperation. I knew you wouldn't look after yourself. Come on, put this on. It should have been a tender gesture, but it pierced straight through me, and tears filled my eyes. From yesterday's plate of pasta to today's jacket, caring for me had become second nature to him, even though his love had faded. He held the jacket open, and I slid my arms through the sleeves before wrapping my arms around his waist. I pressed my face into his shoulder, tears soaking silently through the fabric as I murmured, Declan, I really hate you. I hate that your heart keeps drifting toward whoever is younger and brighter. I hate that you forgot every promise you made, that you claimed to love me, but never loved me enough. Most of all, I hate that I no longer have the strength left to fight for you. Chapter 4. Declan went rigid, but for once he didn't scold me for being ungrateful. Slowly, his arms folded around me, and he murmured, I know. He leaned closer, his jaw tight, and whispered against my ear, Sometimes I hate you too. My eyes stung even more, yet somehow a laugh escaped me. There we stood, clinging to each other, hearts pressed together, trading whispered confessions of hatred. Behind us came the soft click of a camera shutter. I stepped back from Declan's arms and saw the two young women walking toward us, smiling as they held out a Polaroid. You two are adorable together. A perfect match. Declan took the photo and stared at the image of our tangled embrace, unable to find a single word. I grinned and played along. We actually met right here 8 years ago. Now we've come back to relive all those beautiful memories. I wove our story into a fairy tale, painting our past as something magical and bright. The girls were delighted, insisting that Declan and I had restored their faith in love. I laughed along with them. They asked us to join them for seafood boils. As we turned to leave, I noticed Declan's eyes were oddly red. He walked behind me, using his broad frame to block the wind, and suddenly remarked, I should pick up a pair of sunglasses, too. The wind here is merciless. Dinner came alive with the girls at our table. I could barely eat, so I carried the conversation instead. Watching their faces glow with youth, the pain in my body seemed to fade for a while. When dinner ended, it was time to part ways. They wanted to swap contact info, but I deflected with a gentle joke. If fate wills it, we'll cross paths again. After all, there was no sense in forging new friendships. I would be dead soon. And every new bond carries the risk of tears at the end. In the car, Declan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. "You've always been the type to make friends everywhere you go. Why didn't you exchange numbers?" I shrugged. "I've learned my lesson. I don't hand out my info that easily anymore." His face darkened, and though a long silence followed, he held back from starting a fight. Instead, he looked at me with weary resignation. "Is it really that hard for us to have a normal conversation? You're warm and open with complete strangers, but with me it's all sarcasm and ice." I thought he was the one being unreasonable. Strangers were just strangers. They hadn't caused me any harm. He was the closest person in my life, and he was the one who had left me shattered and drowning in pain. "When I used to try talking to you," I shot back, "you always accused me of making a scene." When he loved me, my outbursts were spirited and endearing. Once his love cooled, that same boldness and honesty became evidence that I wasn't mature enough. I had doubted myself, tried to bridge the gap, tried to return to the way things used to be. But none of it worked. When I acted like myself, he found fault. If I softened my approach, he said I was imitating Camille. Once love dies, nothing you do can be right anymore. Declan stayed quiet for a long stretch. Only when the scenery shifted around us did he say softly, "I won't say that to you again." I offered no response. He seemed to have forgotten there would be no again for us. As dusk descended, we made our way up Hatcher Pass. Against the blazing sunset, prayer banners on the hillside snapped and rattled in the gusting wind. I had heard that the native people generally believe all living beings and natural elements, mountains, caves, rivers, possess souls or spirits of their own. Once, with my heart beating only for Declan, I had stood at this very pass and whispered a wish to the distant lake. I want a love with Declan that burns brighter than anything. Now I steadied myself and turned to him with a smile. "Let's get a picture together." The wind whipped my hair into disarray, and for a moment he seemed lost in some distant thought. He nodded, found a passing traveler nearby, and asked for help with the camera. As the man counted down, 3, 2, 1, say cheese. Declan slipped his arm naturally around my shoulders, pulling me close. And silently, deep inside, I whispered, "Declan, may we part ways and never cross paths again, in this life or the next." When the photo was done, the man smiled at us. "You two really have something special." This time I stayed silent. Declan returned the smile and nodded on behalf of us both. I settled onto a nearby rock and watched him laugh and chat with the other travelers, feeling something inside me quietly give way. I used to fantasize about being hypnotized, having every memory of him erased. Now I understood the truth. This was the person I had loved with everything I had. Perhaps only death could finally bring it to an end. Chapter 5. Declan was still deep in conversation with the other traveler, nearly ready to head back, when my phone buzzed with a WhatsApp notification. It was from Camille. "Clara, do you honestly believe that revisiting old memories with Declan will win him back? Don't you realize that if I called him right now, he'd drop everything and come running?" Maybe it was being back in Alaska, but my heart felt strangely light. Words that once would have sent my blood boiling now struck me as nothing more than childish and absurd. No wonder, back then, whenever I had shown Declan her messages, he would just shrug and say, "She's watched too many soap operas. Why let it get to you?" Even his tone back then had carried a thread of indulgence. I shook the thoughts away and typed back, "Your top priority right now should be deleting every romance app off your phone." Then I blocked Camille for good. But the instant I did, I noticed Declan freeze mid-step, pull his phone from his pocket, and turn away to answer a call. I began counting silently. At 15 seconds, he glanced back toward me. Another 10 seconds or so, and he hung up, walked over, and stood in front of me looking like he had something to say, but couldn't get the words out. What was there left to misunderstand? My heart felt as though it had been tossed into the frozen depths of a mountain lake, plunging straight to the bottom. I considered confronting him about Camille's message, threatening him with the divorce papers, demanding that he stay. But I realized none of it mattered anymore. Steadying my breath, which had started to quicken, I asked, "What happened? Who was that?" Declan hesitated, then shook his head with a strained calm.
"No one."
Nothing important. It was as if oxygen flooded back into my veins, and I let out a long, heavy sigh, silently mocking my own desperation. I acted as though nothing had happened. "Come on. I've booked us a hotel in town. We still have a packed schedule tomorrow." Declan nodded, without another word. Once we reached town, he bought me a new shawl and a red knit scarf. That night, we lay side by side on the same bed, neither of us touching. In the darkness, Declan spoke suddenly. "Clara, can we just get along for the rest of this trip? No more fighting. Please." I had waited so long for a request that simple, that peaceful. My nose stung, and I answered quietly, "Okay." True to his word, on the third day of our journey, Declan took the lead, mapping routes, arranging every meal, handling the lodging. He didn't limit us to our old haunts. He found new adventures for us as well. But that night, I overheard him on the hotel's rooftop terrace, murmuring into his phone for hours. Every word was soft and soothing, the kind of gentle coaxing meant for someone precious. Too racked with pain to sleep, I lay there and listened to every syllable. The next morning, we both overslept and didn't check out until noon. While I retouched my makeup in the car, Declan glanced over. "Clara, did you sleep poorly too?" He paused, then tried to sound casual. "There was some bad news from New York last night, so I stepped out to take a call." "Did I wake you?" My hand hovered mid-powder, and I studied his face. He was never much of a liar, and right now he wasn't even trying to hide the worry pooling in his eyes. A sharp ache twisted through my chest, but I didn't press for details. I just shook my head. No, it was just the pillows at that hotel. I couldn't get comfortable. "Declan, let it go." We drove to a small town nestled at the foot of the mountains. When we had visited 5 years earlier, the place was run down and hushed. Now, half a decade later, it had been completely transformed, teeming with tourists drawn by a local festival. We checked into a bed and breakfast, and when I heard there would be a bonfire celebration that night, I rented a gusbuck and braided my hair. Declan put on a gusbuck as well and stood waiting for me in the dressing room. In the mirror, I watched him in that black gusbuck, and a single phrase echoed through my mind. Stern and crag-like, like a lone pine standing by itself. "What?" Declan hadn't caught my mumbling. He walked over and placed a scented sachet in my hand. "Here, it's a special blend. Supposed to help with insomnia and headaches." My fingers closed tightly around the little sachet. I smiled and shook my head. "I was just saying you look like a mountain hemlock." The first time I ever saw him, I thought he resembled those mountain hemlocks, tall and unyielding, especially at these high altitudes. Declan blinked, and then a rare smile flickered across his face, brightening his eyes. "Really?" I returned the smile with a nod.
"Yeah."
"So, when I'm gone, will you buy me a nice grave? Plant some pines and cedars by the headstone so they can stand in for you?" He went perfectly still, the light in his face vanishing instantly. "Don't talk like that." His scolding came laced with panic, which only made it sound powerless. I regretted the words the moment they left my lips, but watching his reaction, the ache in my chest grew heavier still. I forced a grin. "I'm just kidding. Because when I'm gone, it will be the trees of this plateau, none of them tethered to him, that keep me company." Chapter 6. Declan's expression stayed taut, his voice cutting. "Don't make jokes like that again." His anger seemed oddly out of proportion, and a stubborn part of me couldn't help feeling a flicker of hope. I asked, "What is it?"
Are you scared I'll die?
Declan hesitated, turning away before answering flatly, "Don't read into it. I just don't like tempting fate." My heart, which had been on the verge of surfacing, quietly sank back under. I murmured, "All right, I won't." Only then did the tension ease from his face. That evening, the townsfolk built a bonfire on the hillside just outside town. Tourists like us, outfitted in guspucks, joined the circle of singing and dancing. I sat off to the side, watching it all unfold, feeling equal parts envy and longing, yet also a quiet sense that I had lived without regret. I had always loved a crowd, and having one final night like this before I died felt like a kind of closure. Declan suddenly asked, "Aren't you going to join them?" His eyes were on the flames, but his gaze seemed fixed somewhere in the distant past. "I remember you used to win awards for folk dancing. The day you agreed to be with me, you danced for me." My mind traveled back to that unforgettable day. The day we made it official, I danced for him in front of Mount Farquhar. I wore a red dress, spinning in the morning light, the sunlit mountain blazing behind me. It had been the brightest, happiest moment of my entire life. Embracing my lover, my burning spirit, my freedom. Remembering it now, grief and tenderness rose together, and my eyes grew wet. I turned to him and spoke gently. "They say the golden sunrise on Mount Farquhar is something rare. If we catch it again on this trip, I'll dance for you one more time." Declan held my gaze, something shifting behind his eyes. "All right." His voice came out rough, almost hoarse. Perhaps it was the spell of the night, but we sat there staring at each other as the rest of the world dissolved. I could hear the drumming of my own heart and found myself leaning closer. As our breaths intertwined, our lips a whisper apart, Declan pulled back sharply, his eyes clearing in an instant, as though he had snapped out of a dream. He forced a laugh. "What? Having second thoughts?" He looked away, adding awkwardly, "Don't lose sight of why we came here." All the warmth inside me vanished. He was reminding me, in his roundabout way, that this was a trip meant for divorce. That kind of deflection, masked behind humor, stung worse than any outburst ever had. Anger flared through me.
Don't worry.
I haven't forgotten for a second, and I don't regret any of it. I snatched up the glass of local craft beer that had sat untouched all evening and locked eyes with him. "I swear on this mountain, on this drink, if I keep clinging to you once this trip is over, then let me die in misery, and even in death, never find peace." I tilted the glass back, ready to drain it. Smack! Declan knocked the glass out of my hand, shot to his feet, and pointed at me livid. "What is wrong with you? You can't just hurl curses like that." People nearby turned to stare. I ignored them, frowning as I snapped. "Isn't that exactly what you wanted to hear? What's your problem?" Declan's chest heaved with fury, and after a long, seething pause, he spat out, "You really are insane." He spun on his heel, ready to storm off. I called after him, "Declan, I made my vow. Now make me a promise." He stopped, frowning as he looked back. "What now?" I pulled myself to my feet and walked toward him. In his firelit eyes, I could see my own pale, smiling face reflected. "Promise me, after we go home, you'll never set foot in Alaska again for the rest of your life. Deal?" Chapter 7. Declan's expression shifted instantly. I braced myself for another outburst, but instead his voice came out tight and strained. "Clara, what is going on with you? These past few days you've been saying things that make no sense, acting strange, almost as if..." He trailed off, but his hand found mine and gripped it as his eyes searched my face. "Are you keeping something from me?" It felt as though someone had twisted my heart, the ache curling my fingers into fists. For one trembling moment, I wanted to tell him everything, but I knew it would only add more pain. I forced myself to pull free, mimicking his detached tone. Declan, are you getting cold feet? 3 days from now, we'll be strangers. None of this concerns you. The color drained from Declan's face, shade by shade. Guilt rose inside me like a wave, but then he gritted his teeth and fired back. Fine. Then whether I ever come back to Alaska is none of your concern either. He shot me a withering glare, turned, and strode back toward the inn. Through the blur of tears, I watched his retreating figure, letting it serve as a rehearsal for our final goodbye. I just don't want you coming back here with someone new after I'm gone, retracing the paths we once walked together. Even if our souls somehow crossed again, I couldn't bear that kind of pain. On the 5th day of the trip, we visited a small town. After spending the night at the hotel, we woke before dawn and drove to the best vantage point for Mount Farquhar. As the sky gradually brightened, the mountain's majestic silhouette emerged from the morning mist. Snow draped the dark slopes, carving a clean, winding line along the ridges. With luck, you might witness golden sunlight spilling over the snowy summit, a rare and breathtaking spectacle. But even as morning arrived, clouds clung stubbornly to the peaks. Disappointment tugged at me. When I saw the same look mirrored in Declan's eyes, I offered, "Declan, let me dance for you." I slipped off my red scarf and coat. Dressed in bright red, just as I had been years ago, I began to dance before the towering mountain. My body lacked the strength it once possessed. Every movement was softer, more fragile, stripped of the power I used to command. But all I wanted was to release the ache and regret that had settled in my heart. I was still young enough to love and hate with abandon, yet my life was already reaching its end. Even so, I wanted to spend every last drop of energy letting my soul dance one final time, to say goodbye to the world on my own terms. Look, the sun's breaking through. It's the golden sunrise. Gasps and cheers erupted from every direction. My legs buckled, and I staggered to one side. Declan rushed forward and caught me in his arms. He held on so tightly that our bodies collided with a dull thud. Leaning against him, I turned to gaze at Mount Farquhar in the distance. The clouds had finally parted, and sunlight flooded the summit, turning the snow a dazzling, radiant gold. A surge of emotion tore through me, spilling out as tears. "Declan, it's the golden sunrise." He wrapped his coat around me, his voice trembling with something he could not name. "Yeah, we got to see it again." Catching my breath, I stared at the stunning scene, desperate to etch every detail into memory forever. Around us, people rushed to make wishes toward the golden mountain. I looked up and saw Declan standing with his eyes closed, silently making his own. And I couldn't help wondering, was he thinking of me in his arms, or praying for a future with Camille? As if reading my thoughts, Declan opened his eyes and met my gaze. He looked genuinely happy, a smile breaking across his face. "Why are you staring at me like that? It's not every day you see the golden sunrise. Did you make a wish?" I thought of all those years when I loved him fiercely, making wishes at every mountain we visited. Every single one had been a wish for a lifetime together. A bitter smile crossed my lips, and I shook my head. I already made mine at Hatcher Pass Dash. Before I could finish, Declan's phone rang. It was Camille calling. I stepped back, quietly slipped on my coat, and wound my scarf around my neck. Declan looked at me, hesitating as though words were on the tip of his tongue, but then he turned and walked away to answer. The golden light on Mount Farquhar slowly faded. After a moment's hesitation, I pulled out my phone, took a photo, and posted it to Instagram. The caption was just a few words. "No regrets in this life." It was my final message to the world. No matter how much regret I carried, I wanted to say I had none. Chapter 8. Clara. Declan finished his call and came over, hesitating. We should head back. I understood what he meant. Back to New York. The journey had run its course. So I said, fine. Let's go pack our things at the hotel. He seemed to have more he wanted to say, but I didn't ask. I simply walked away. We gathered our belongings and took a different route back to Anchorage. By nightfall, we found ourselves in the city once more. After returning the rental car, we sat down for dinner in downtown Anchorage. Declan pulled out his phone and began checking flights. There's a red-eye to John F. Kennedy International Airport tonight. We can grab a cab and dash. But I cut in. Let's say goodbye right here. My face was cold, my voice flat. You promised to drive with me for 7 days. It's only day 5, and you're already rushing to leave. Is your girlfriend throwing a tantrum? Declan looked stunned for a beat before his expression hardened. What girlfriend? I'm heading back because dash. Save it. I interrupted again. Camille called you at Hatcher Pass. You were already planning to cut this trip short then, weren't you? And the night before last, you spent hours whispering comfort to her on the phone. I heard every single word. I had meant to provoke him, to drive him away, but the anger was real now, tearing through the composure I had fought so hard to maintain. No matter how badly I wanted to believe these past days had been about us, his heart kept drifting elsewhere. Declan stared at me, stunned. You heard. I pulled the divorce papers from my bag, signed them without so much as a glance, and tossed them across the table. Take these and go comfort her. I'll finish the trip on my own. With that, I stood and walked out of the restaurant. I had barely made it outside when Declan's voice rang out behind me. Clara. I stopped and turned. Downtown Anchorage was coming alive with lights. Tourists filled the sidewalks, snapping photos and browsing souvenir stalls. In the fading twilight, Declan stood at the crossroads of faith and reality, his tangled gaze locked on me. Clara, come home with me. His voice had gone soft. There are things I'll explain. Give me time. Every nerve in my body seized, my breath catching in my throat. I knew what he was telling me in his own way, that we didn't have to go through with the divorce. But it was too late. Regret crashed over me like a flood, and I gasped for air beneath it. Clenching my fists, I choked back the tears. No need. Your explanations don't matter. I swore an oath. I hope you'll keep your promise. The emotion drained from Declan's eyes, retreating behind a cold, unreadable mask. A long silence hung between us before he spoke in a low voice. All right, I'll go back to New York first. If you change your mind, just let me know. He turned and walked away, one step at a time. An overwhelming surge of loss swelled inside me. I knew this goodbye was final. Not merely separation, but death. Regret struck hard. I had said so many cruel things and forgotten to give him one last embrace. There must have been a better way to say farewell. Why did it have to end like this? I counted his steps as he walked away, telling myself that if he just turned around, I would run to him and hold him, no matter the cost. If he would only look back one more time. But he disappeared around the corner without ever turning. I couldn't hold on any longer. I found a dark corner and sobbed into my hands. What I didn't know was that he was thinking the exact same thing. If I had called out, he would have come back and stayed. And so this was our ending. We walked away in silence, neither of us able to turn back. Chapter 9. After what felt like an eternity, I finally forced myself to walk away in the opposite direction, my legs wooden and stiff. I made my way back alone to the hotel where Declan and I had once stayed together. For the next several days, I remained in my hotel room. I painted a picture based on the Polaroid taken at Eklutna Lake. In the painting, Declan and I were still holding each other tightly, but I had added a pair of wings to my back. It was, in its own way, making up for the embrace we had missed. I framed the painting and tucked a voice recorder into the narrow gap behind the frame. There was only a brief recording of my voice on it. Declan, I have always been a contradictory person. I wish you would never return to Alaska, yet I also fantasize that someday you might find your way back here. If the day comes when you hear this recording, I hope by then you are already living a happy new life. As for me, I will probably have become a tree on the plateau. By then, I'm sure I will have forgotten you entirely. At the end, I let out a soft laugh. See, this has turned into a joyful funeral. The following day, I carried the painting to the private art gallery in downtown Anchorage and found Gabriel. Gabriel, I'd like to hang this painting in your gallery. I can pay you. I imagined that if Declan ever returned and remembered this gallery, this painting would serve as my last gift to him. When Gabriel understood my intention, he agreed without hesitation. He refused my money and hung the painting in a prominent spot on the first floor. He said, "Before this painting becomes a gift for your husband, consider it my gift." His kindness warmed me deeply, and I shared a cup of tea with him before saying a proper farewell. I collected the portrait Gabriel had painted for me and traveled alone to the nearby St. Michael's Cathedral. In the final days of my life, I stayed within this chapel. I secured a place in the columbarium and left my portrait in the great hall where the deceased were honored. For decades after my death, my urn would rest amid chanting on my behalf and receive prayers for my next life. With all of it arranged, I could finally go in peace to meet my last journey. Half a month later, Declan arrived at St. Michael's Cathedral with Camille. This time, they had come to arrange a funeral ceremony for Camille's mother, who was also Clara's aunt, Margot Lawson. The last time, when Margot had been rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night with a critical illness, it was Camille who called him. He consoled her while simultaneously reaching out to specialists. Because of the strained relationship between Clara and Margot's family, he hadn't figured out how to break the news of Margot's condition to Clara. Then, unexpectedly, Clara overheard, jumped to the wrong conclusion, and refused to hear his explanation. Even now, after so many days, she hadn't sent him a single message. This time, Camille had asked Declan to accompany her to Alaska because Margot's final wish was to have her funeral arranged at a chapel here. Though he worried Clara would be furious, he also wanted the chance to explain everything face to face and then bring her back to New York. Before long, he secured an appointment with the chapel director regarding Margot's funeral arrangements. Because of this, he was granted permission to attend a ceremony in advance. A funeral was being held that afternoon, and before it started, they toured the chapel. Camille noticed his distracted state and pressed her lips together before speaking. "Declan, does Clara know you promised to come with me for the funeral? Last time, she blocked me in a rage, and I still haven't been able to add her back." Declan's anxiety deepened, his tone growing colder. "I haven't told her about your mother's illness yet. She's been in a fragile mood lately. Don't provoke her." Camille's expression stiffened. She was about to respond when they accidentally wandered into a great hall lined with urns honoring countless deceased. These urns held not ashes, but the personal belongings of the dead, temporarily stored in the church before the local funeral. Declan paused, meaning to turn and leave. Then his gaze sharpened, and his head snapped toward a portrait in the corner. He strode forward, desperate to read the name on the urn, but it was written entirely in Tlingit, which he could not decipher. A wave of panic bore down so heavily on his heart it nearly stopped. At that moment, Camille stepped up beside him and spoke with calm assurance. "Declan, the girl in this portrait looks a lot like Clara, but I'm certain it isn't her. Besides, Clara is off traveling, isn't she? Why would there be an urn here with her name on it?" Only then did Declan exhale, telling himself he had been overthinking. He let the thought go and walked with Camille toward the platform where bodies were placed for the local funeral rite. When they reached the platform, Declan stepped past the railing. While a local resident offered an enthusiastic explanation, his eyes locked onto the body at the center, wrapped in a bag and bound with ropes. It appeared to be a woman's body, not tall, and alarmingly thin. A sudden, piercing pain shot through Declan's chest. Before he could trace the source of that pain, the monks began their chanting. Declan knew the next step called for the family to carry or bear the deceased around the platform several times. But strangely, it was the chapel staff performing the task. Where was her family? Through swirling incense smoke, countless vultures glided in from the distance, settling nearby alongside the mourners in silent vigil. Soon, several funeral caretakers appeared, bone knives and cleavers in hand. Camille gasped softly. "Oh my God! Are they going to dismember the body? That's horrifying." As she spoke, she shrank behind Declan. Yet Declan felt a strange, inexplicable pull in his chest, a force that bound him to the spot and compelled him to stare, unblinking, at the platform. He watched as the caretakers deftly loosened the ropes and peeled back the cloth wrapping the body. In the next instant, a beautiful yet ashen face was laid bare for everyone to see.
Chapter 10. Every trace of color drained from Declan's face in an instant. His eyes went wide, as though the world had frozen around him. Staring at that familiar face, his gaze filled with disbelief. Clara, Camille was stunned as well, her voice thick with incredulity. Declan snapped back to his senses and lunged forward on instinct. "Wait! You have it wrong. This is my wife. She can't be dead. She wouldn't be here. Put her down." Will Crane, one of the staff nearby, seized him and held him back, refusing to let him advance. "The ceremony cannot be interrupted, or the soul of the deceased will be considered tainted by sin, unable to find peace." Camille recovered at that moment and grabbed Declan as well. "Declan, don't panic. That probably isn't Clara. Maybe it's just someone who looks like her. We should respect local customs and not disrupt someone else's funeral." Declan's bloodshot eyes remained locked on the woman lying on the platform. For a long moment, he couldn't think straight. Could that bloodless face truly be Clara's? Wait, let me confirm. But the funeral, once begun, could not be halted. Will continued to restrain him, preventing any rash movement. All he could do was watch helplessly as the caretakers lit the incense to summon the circling vultures. Then they dismembered the body, crushed it, mixed it with bannock, and scattered it across the platform. The vultures and birds overhead swooped down immediately, descending to feed. The funeral masters formed a circle, lowered their heads, closed their eyes, and softly recited the Bible. Incense filled his nostrils, chanting entered his ears, as if this were the most sacred place on earth. Yet within that hallowed scene, vultures and birds tore savagely at raw flesh, life disintegrating until nothing remained but smoke. The fragmented spectacle and its brutal contrasts left Declan in a state of total disorientation. He stood there, staring blankly at what lay before him, unable to form a single word. Not until the body on the platform had been entirely consumed by the vultures. Even then, he had not moved. For a long, suspended moment, he could not tell whether this was reality or illusion. Had a funeral truly just taken place here? Had someone truly been lying there? Was that person really Clara? A crushing weight settled in his chest, as though everything around him had been veiled in a hazy film. He didn't even notice when Camille, white-faced and shaking, slipped away to vomit in private. It was not until the ceremony concluded that the director approached and said, "These are the steps of our funeral rite. The local people believe that only through this process can one return to nature and achieve the eternity of reincarnation and spirit. It may be difficult for outsiders to understand, but that's perfectly all right. Take whatever time you need to decide whether you wish to proceed with the reservation." Camille's face was ashen, her eyes glistening with tears. "It's too terrifying." Even as she spoke, she stole a cautious glance at Declan, a barely perceptible thread of hope woven into her tone. "Declan, do you think, could that body just now really have been Clara? If it wasn't, the resemblance was uncanny." Declan paid her no attention. Instead, as he passed the hall where the portraits and urns were displayed, he turned and walked back inside. He still remembered the portrait that had shaken him to his core, the one he had dismissed. He needed to look at it properly. The funeral ceremony had been too swift, too shocking, and he could not confirm whether the woman had truly been Clara. Now, standing before the portrait, he still hesitated to recognize it. The person in the painting smiled so brightly, sunlight spilling across her face as though gilding her in gold. Radiant, passionate, uninhibited, confident. No beautiful word seemed too extravagant to describe her. How could this possibly be Clara? In the years since their marriage, she had grown more and more frantic, her face contorted with anguish. When they came to Alaska together, she had calmed down, but there was no light behind her eyes. No matter the mood, it all seemed different from the woman in the portrait. Declan tried to reassure himself this way, wanting to quiet his mind long enough to reach Clara again. But in the next moment, he spotted a familiar artist's signature in the corner. Though it was rendered in Tlingit, which he could not read, the owner of that signature had a painting hanging in his living room for the past 5 years. He could not be mistaken. The artist of this painting was Gabriel, the curator of the art gallery in downtown Anchorage. Chapter 11. Declan recalled that in the year of their wedding, he and Clara had purchased a painting of a sea of columbines from Gabriel's shop. Gabriel had told them, "In Alaska, the columbine is the flower of love. Lovers give each other columbines to symbolize eternal devotion." Clara had been so touched by this that she bought the painting and hung it in their bedroom. Sadly, during their final argument, water had been splashed across it, and the once beautiful sea of columbines dissolved into a blurred mess, as though reflecting the scattered ruins of their years together. He had meant to have it restored when the opportunity arose, but the busyness of life kept pushing it from his mind. As the memory of that neglected painting surfaced, Declan felt an unexpected, piercing ache deep in his chest. It seemed that over the years, far too many details had been discarded by him, just like that painting. Unable to remain any longer, Declan left Camille behind at the chapel and headed alone toward downtown Anchorage. He needed to find out exactly who the subject of that painting was. Yet the moment he stepped into the art gallery, the sight before him stopped him cold. Hanging in the most prominent position in the first-floor hall was a painting marked with the words, "Not for sale." In it, the sky and lake glowed in pure, vivid blue, and a pair of lovers held each other tightly by the water's edge. The colors and brushwork were gorgeous and deeply romantic. The only peculiar detail was a pair of angel wings painted on the girl's back. Declan's heartbeat quickened even more, and he began to tremble with every breath he took. He knew this scene intimately. It captured the exact moment when he and Clara had embraced beside Eklutna Lake. The style of the work was entirely different from anything else displayed in the gallery, so much so that another name suddenly rose in Declan's mind. Clara. She had painted this with her own hands. But why had she added wings to her own back? Could it be that when she created this, she already knew she would? Declan could not bring himself to follow that thought any further. He felt as though he were trapped inside an enormous mystery, where every object he encountered after that shocking discovery seemed to be a clue deliberately planted in advance. Everything pointed toward the final outcome, that death. Just as he stood lost in thought, a voice speaking imperfect Mandarin addressed him from nearby. "Mr. Ashford, you are here." Only then did Declan snap back to the present and turn his head. Gabriel wore a white guspuck with no additional accessories, as though he were in mourning for someone. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the painting, a trace of grief lingering in his gaze. "Ms. Whitmore painted this herself. She told me that if you ever came, it would be left for you as her final gift. I expected to wait a long time, but you arrived much sooner than I anticipated." Looking at him, Declan felt as though an enormous hand was clenching his heart, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He could no longer fool himself, yet he was even more terrified of confronting the truth. After a prolonged silence, when he finally managed to speak, his voice emerged so hoarse it was nearly unrecognizable. "So that portrait, it really was your work?" He had intended to pose it as a question, but the crushing panic and grief bearing down on his chest made it impossible to raise his voice at all. Gabriel turned to face him, and before a single word left his lips, his eyes were already rimmed with red. "It seems you already know about her." From the expression on Declan's face, Gabriel also understood that Clara was no longer alive. He closed his eyes and said, "More than 20 days ago, Ms. Whitmore came to downtown Anchorage alone to find me. She wanted me to paint her portrait." Declan felt as if he had been struck on the head, and through the haze, he realized it must have been their very first day in Alaska. Because on that day, he had left Clara entirely on her own. Chapter 12. Declan thought back to that moment in the clothing store, watching Clara slip into the long dress, looking as though she had returned to the woman she was years ago. His heart had been brimming with excitement and nostalgia at the time, and he had wanted to tell her how young and beautiful the dress made her look. But for some inexplicable reason, he brought up Camille instead. He had meant to explain himself, but Clara reacted so intensely that she never gave him the chance. In truth, he had always regretted leaving her there by herself that day, forcing her to endure the curious stares of strangers alone. It was simply that their relationship had been strained for so long, weighed down by too many arguments and grievances, until they both gradually forgot how to yield to one another. At the time, he had wanted to save a bowl of pasta, waiting for Clara to come back so they could sit down and have a proper conversation. But before she returned, exhaustion overtook him and he fell asleep. If he had not abandoned her that day, or if he had not drifted off first, would he have known where Clara went, whom she met, and what arrangements she made for her own final affairs? The belated understanding cut into Declan like a blade, leaving a deep scar across his heart. Words failed him. Only the redness of his eyes revealed what churned within. Gabriel let out a sigh, carefully took down the painting Clara had made, and spoke to Declan on his own initiative. "Ms. Whitmore brought this painting when she came here a second time, about half a month ago. It is also a gift she crafted for you with her own hands. She said that if you ever returned here, this gift was to be given to you. If you never came back in this lifetime, then you would never know that a piece of her heart had once been left behind for you in Alaska." He shook his head as he spoke. "Love, hate, life, and death are all impermanent." Declan stood mechanically at the edge of downtown Anchorage, the painting clutched in his hands, his mind consumed by an overwhelming sense of unreality. When had Clara painted this? Was it after he left? How had that woman managed to arrange everything behind his back, letting him uncover it all, step by step, as though each discovery had been staged in advance? She had mapped out her journey through life, and even left him a keepsake? The absurdity of the thought almost made Declan laugh, but in reality, he did not even dare to blink. Every step back toward the hotel felt as though he were drifting on clouds. The moment he returned to the hotel, Camille emerged from her room. Spotting him, she hurried over with a wounded expression. "Declan, why did you leave me all alone at St. Michael's Cathedral and come back to Anchorage by yourself today?" "I had to beg a stranger for a ride and was frightened half to death." As she spoke, Declan walked straight past her without so much as a glance, like a corpse moving on autopilot with all its senses extinguished. "Declan, what's the matter with you?" Camille asked, her surprise tinged with fear, and in the next instant she noticed the painting he carried. "Who painted that? Is it a souvenir you picked up?" Before she could finish the sentence, Declan opened his door and shut it squarely in her face. With all unnecessary sounds sealed away, Declan suddenly felt as if he had plunged into total silence. He lowered his gaze to the painting in his hands. When his eyes settled on those wings, a wave of sorrow stung them, and a tear slipped free without warning. His heart clenched in alarm, afraid his tears might blur the paint, and he instinctively moved the painting aside. There was a click. The wooden frame accidentally struck the hard surface nearby, and a slender object tumbled out. It was a voice recorder. Chapter 13. Tears still clung to the corners of Declan's eyes, and he froze for a moment when the recorder fell out. He examined the back of the picture frame, and only then noticed a groove running along the edge. The recorder appeared to have been wedged into it, and had just been knocked loose. He understood at once that this, too, had been placed there by Clara. Recalling Gabriel's words, Declan felt as though invisible fingers were wringing his heart, making every breath a struggle. "Clara, is this also a gift you left behind for me?" His hands shook as he picked up the recorder, but for a long moment, he could not bring himself to press play. What would Clara say to him? Furious, hysterical accusations? Cold-hearted resentment? Or a final, irreversible goodbye? Declan shut his eyes, steadied his ragged breathing, and pressed play as though awaiting a verdict. In the next instant, a faint yet tender voice emerged. The moment it sounded, it seized his breath entirely. Declan, I have always been a person full of contradictions, hoping you would never return to Alaska, yet also imagining that someday you might come back to the old place. If one day you hear this recording, I hope that by then you are already living a happy new life. As for me, I have probably become a tree on the plateau. By then, I must have forgotten you completely. In her final moments, her voice held no anger or bitterness, only deep tenderness and regret. At the very end, she choked back a sob and let out a quiet laugh. You see, this has turned into a joyful funeral. Those two words, joyful funeral, struck Declan like a sudden blade, piercing through his days. He could no longer deceive himself, could no longer run from this merciless reality. Clara was truly gone. She had walked the last stretch of her life right beside him, and he had been completely oblivious. In the end, she departed from this world before his very eyes, leaving him to watch her go, unable even to keep a handful of ashes. Yet he had kept lying to himself, refusing to believe that the name Clara could ever be connected to death, refusing to believe that he truly could never find her again, never see her again, never touch her again. He could no longer quarrel with her over petty things until both their faces were flushed, could no longer pull her tightly into his arms while quietly planning their future together. There was no future left for them. Slowly, he raised a hand to cover his eyes, and a muffled sob tore from his throat. It echoed through the empty room like a cry for help that would never receive an answer. He did not sleep at all that night. Early the following morning, Declan returned to St. Michael's Cathedral. He sought out the same will from the day before, wanting to learn about Clara's final days before her death. The moment Will caught sight of him, he led Declan to a small room and handed him a shoulder bag. These are Clara's belongings. Since we couldn't reach any family members, they were supposed to be disposed of. But you came yesterday and told us you were her husband, so these now belong to you. Declan stared at the familiar bag, instinctively pressed it against his chest, and asked in a rough voice, "Did she stay at the chapel before she passed?" When he spoke of her death, his voice cracked despite his efforts. Will nodded. "She contacted our chapel roughly a month ago, hoping we could arrange a funeral for her. She stayed with us for more than 10 days. Every time I saw her, she looked especially frail and thin, yet she always had a smile on her face. She was a truly kind person. It's a shame." He trailed off with a shake of his head. Listening to the account, Declan gradually drifted into a trance. A dull ache bloomed in his chest, and he wondered, if Clara had always been so gentle and warm toward everyone else, why had their own relationship grown so bitter over the years? Why was Clara always so quick to anger in his presence? At that moment, they arrived at the entrance of a large hall. Declan spotted candles flickering inside and asked, "What is this place?" Will explained, "This is the hall where we hold prayers for the departed. The merit of the prayers lights the way for the deceased, helping them move beyond suffering into eternal peace." He paused, then continued, "Clara is also here. The priests and believers all offer prayers for the departed." A sharp, stinging pain spread through Declan's heart. Had Clara believed he would never find this place in his lifetime, that no one would ever pray for her, and so she had arranged a resting place for her ashes before she died? Chapter 14. Declan closed his eyes and said quietly, "I want to pray for her," and light another candle. He lit a candle before Clara's urn. His gaze traveled to the highest point of the candelabrum, where a bright flame flickered and swayed. All at once, Declan remembered Clara dancing beneath the golden sunlight on Denali. So she truly had been burning her life away. Only after leaving the chapel did Declan open Clara's bag. Inside, apart from cosmetics and her phone, there were several bottles of medication, along with the scarf and shawl he had bought for her. A vague sense of dread crept over Declan. Throughout the entire journey, Clara had been taking medicine. She had told him it was for altitude sickness, and Declan had assumed it was for depression. But now it seemed neither was the case. After all, by the time they parted, Clara had already grown so thin that a strong gust might carry her away. Declan looked up the names on the medicine bottles online. The instant the results appeared, his hand shook violently, and the bottles clattered onto the floor. They were anti-cancer drugs, prescribed for stomach cancer. Declan stared at the words on the screen, his throat constricting as though something were choking him, tightening around his windpipe until he could barely breathe. Why? Why did you have such a terrible illness and never tell me? He murmured these words. Then his breath suddenly hitched as a memory surged to the surface of his mind. Back when Clara claimed she suffered from depression, he had believed her and even gone with her to see a psychologist. But not long after, Camille placed a test report on his desk and said, "Declan, I had someone look into it. Clara is just taking ordinary vitamins, and the medical records were fabricated. After all, people with real depression have no energy. Clara brings you lunch every single day and is always so cheerful. How could she possibly be depressed? But don't be angry. She probably just pretended to be sick so you'd spend more time with her. It's better to talk to her gently." Reflecting on Clara's condition during that period, Declan had to concede she did not resemble someone battling depression. So he had accepted Camille's explanation without question and was even led to believe Clara was merely seeking attention. He had even frowned and scolded her. "We've been married all these years. How can you still be so childish? You resort to such juvenile tricks? Do you think I'm a fool?" At the time, Clara stared at him in complete disbelief, and then they plunged into yet another brutal argument. Despite her fury, Clara had tried to explain, but he had dismissed every word as nothing more than excuses. Perhaps that was the very incident that shattered her heart beyond repair, so that even when her days were numbered, she never intended to reveal her illness. She had always been someone who loved and hated with her whole being. Declan closed his eyes, recognizing for the first time how memories and regret could shadow a person, cutting as sharp as any blade. This trip had originally been planned for only 3 days. So on the second day, Declan and Camille boarded their return flight. After landing in New York, they went directly to the hospital to see Margot. Margot was Clara's aunt. The two had always been close, but ever since Camille joined his company, Clara's relationship with the Lawson family had deteriorated, eventually reaching the point where they had no contact at all. This time, his trip to Alaska was supposed to deliver news of Margot's illness to Clara, but instead, Declan shut his eyes, forced his emotions down, and pushed open the hospital room door. Margot lay in the bed, tubes running all over her body, struggling even to speak. Despite everything, her eyes remained locked on Declan. While Camille stepped out to consult the doctor, Margot managed to say, "Declan, Clara, she still won't come see me." A look of raw anguish flashed across Declan's eyes, and he pressed his lips tightly together in silence. The light in Margot's eyes gradually faded, and tears welled at their corners. "It's my fault. I treated her and Camille the same my entire life. But when it came to your marriage, I took my own daughter's side. Back then, I told her your bond was too strong for Camille to ever break apart. I begged her not to push Camille away. It was all my foolishness." As her endless confessions poured out, Declan's heart grew numb with pain. So every hysterical moment Clara had over the years was the result of being driven to the edge, piece by piece, by the people around her and the circumstances they created. He wanted to feel hatred, but he no longer knew where to direct it. Margot summoned every ounce of her remaining strength to lift her hand and tug gently at Declan's sleeve. "Declan, could you ask Clara to come see me? I want to apologize to her face to face." Was it really true that a dying person's final words were always kind? Declan looked into the pleading in her eyes and let out a laugh, but tears spilled down his face beyond his control. "Margot, I can't bring her here. She died alone in Alaska, and even arranged her own funeral before she passed. The day Camille and I arrived, we happened to walk into her funeral. I watched with my own eyes as her body was cut by knives, pecked by birds. In the end, nothing remained. Margot, if you want to apologize to her, you can wait a few more days and go find her yourself." Chapter 15. Declan tore apart the last shred of hope for those among them burdened with guilt, his voice cold to the point of cruelty. Every word that left his mouth felt like slow torture upon his own heart. But as he watched Margot shift from utter disbelief to a pain so overwhelming she wanted to scream, yet could produce no sound, it was as though his own suffering finally found a moment to breathe. People like them deserve to endure this. Declan rose, offered her a slight bow, and said, "But if at all possible, I still hope that after you leave, you will not disturb her anymore. I believe she would not want to see us. After saying this, he took one final look at Margot, who was gasping and weeping in agony, then turned and walked away without hesitation. Declan went home. When he opened the door, everything was exactly as it had been when he left. On the coffee table sat a bouquet of yarn flowers Clara had crafted by hand. Her paintings still hung on the wall, and her coat, not yet put away, was draped across the sofa. Every corner was saturated with Clara's presence and traces of her existence. Yet the figure from his memories had vanished. Declan suddenly felt the house become unbearably hollow, as though a vast piece of his heart had been carved away. He was exhausted beyond measure, yet sleep refused to come. He opened the wardrobe, pulled out every piece of Clara's clothing, and piled them all on the bed, only then feeling the faintest hint of comfort. It was only in that moment that he understood why Clara had departed with just a single bag and no extra clothes. From the very start, she had never planned to come back. Declan closed his eyes, and only within this sealed-off little world could he finally allow his emotions to spill over. He covered his head with Clara's red scarf and wept in silence, his heart clenching with every sharp breath, the anguish nearly suffocating him, while the faint trace of her scent lingered in each inhale. Only one thought remained in his mind. Clara, please come visit me in my dreams. But Clara did not appear in his dreams. As expected, she did not want to see him. After that day, Declan seemed to revert to the calm, rational person he had once been. The crushing pain subsided, but every word Clara had ever spoken became especially vivid in his memory. He recalled how Clara had once half-jokingly said she hoped that after her death, he would plant mountain hemlocks at her grave. So Declan purchased the finest burial plot for her, erected a tombstone, and personally planted mountain hemlocks at her resting place. This way, it's as if I'm always beside you. He rested his forehead against the cool stone, closed his eyes briefly, then turned and walked away. Time slipped by day after day, and before he knew it, an entire year had passed. Declan expanded his company, becoming a fixture on the front page of financial news. Yet the more admirers and followers who surrounded him, the more he felt like a hollow shell going through the motions. Only in moments of solitude and confusion, when thoughts of Clara surfaced, did his heart and emotions stir to life. Meanwhile, Margot's health continued to decline. Camille came to plead with Declan several times, asking him to visit, but he turned her down every time. It was not until Margot finally passed that he returned to the hospital to handle her affairs. At the hospital, Camille was inconsolable. Declan, before my mom passed, she kept saying she wanted to have her funeral at the same place where Clara had hers. She wanted to go and apologize to Clara. As she spoke, she bowed deeply before Declan, whose expression remained unmoved. Please, help me and my mother this one last time. I believe that if Clara is watching from above, she would want her final wish to be honored. Declan regarded her in silence for a long time, and ultimately, he took Camille and Margot's body to St. Michael's Cathedral, where he arranged a funeral for Margot. Before the ceremony concluded, Declan slipped away. Perhaps because he had returned to Alaska, the longing he had buried inside suddenly erupted like a downpour. He found Will again, the same man from the year before, and could not resist asking, "Those who have a local funeral leave nothing behind. How am I supposed to pay my respects?" Will replied, "After the ceremony, the soul of the departed returns to the sky, the body to nature. Every blade of grass you see, every cloud, every gust of wind, is her." Those words struck something deep within Declan's heart. After leaving the chapel, he canceled his return flight, delegated his work, and sent Camille back alone. He told her, "I want to walk again the paths Clara and I once traveled together." Camille's eyes widened, and she stared at Declan as though he had lost his mind, unable to stop herself from saying, "Clara is all ready." Before she could finish, Declan cut her off. "The American branch needs staff. I've already arranged for you to take a position there. The transfer will be finalized tonight. You should go take up your post." With that, he left on his own, setting out once more. He finally understood. Clara's soul lived here. Wherever he went, Clara would be with him. It was simply that when he was in downtown Anchorage, Clara was by the shore of Eklutna Lake, feeling the wind. When Clara watched the golden sunlight on Mount Farquhar, he was at the horse racing festival enjoying the competition. They simply kept missing each other. Yet just as he returned to downtown Anchorage, he spotted a familiar figure near Gabriel's art gallery, about to turn the corner. That person wore a white dress and a red scarf, her figure swaying, looking exactly like the one who lived in his memories. Declan froze on the spot. Almost instantly, he surged forward and seized the person's hand. Clara dash. Chapter 16. The person turned around, looking at Declan with a face full of surprise, and asked with some confusion, "Hello, is there something I can help you with?" Declan gazed at the unfamiliar face, and his heart slowly went cold. "It's nothing." He released her hand, forced a smile, and said, "I just thought you bore a strong resemblance to someone I once knew. My apologies, I mistook you for someone else." The girl glanced at him, said nothing, and walked off with her friends. Declan watched her retreat and was suddenly struck by how foolish and reckless he had just been. The girl was noticeably shorter than Clara, carried the kind of single-shoulder bag Clara never liked, and even wore the tall boots Clara always found bothersome. Only a white dress and scarf bore any resemblance. In every other way, there was almost nothing alike. Declan pulled his gaze away and allowed himself a helpless, bitter smile. He had been there at Clara's funeral ceremony. He had witnessed with his own eyes as Clara was consumed by vultures. So how could he still believe she might be alive, or imagine he could run into her somewhere? Declan laughed at his own absurdity, admitting that Will's words had made him somewhat superstitious. Pushing down the ache in his chest, he headed straight for the Alaska Native Heritage Center. On the square in front of the entrance, many people wore guspucks while live streaming or posing for photos, and couples dressed in wedding gowns or Alaska Native regalia were taking wedding pictures. The sky stretched wide and high overhead, white clouds drifting lazily. Before the red tiles and white walls, lovers pressed their palms together, vowing eternal love. Something stirred in Declan's heart, and he suddenly remembered that 7 years ago, he had proposed to Clara on this very spot. At the time, he had secretly arranged with a photography team, telling Clara he wanted to take her here for a photo shoot. After her makeup was finished and she changed into a guspuck, he brought her to the square in front of the Alaska Native Heritage Center. When the photographer asked him to pose facing Clara, kneeling on one knee, he produced the wedding ring and said, "Clara, I love you. Will you marry me?" Declan could still picture Clara's astonishment in that moment. She had even wept, thrown her arms around him, and whispered softly, "I will." Later, when they discussed their wedding photos, Clara said she wanted a set taken at the Alaska Native Heritage Center. After all, it was where their marriage began. But Declan had just inherited the family business and was swamped with work every single day. Clara felt sorry for him and did not want him taking time off for personal reasons, so they simply never took wedding photos. She even soothed his guilty conscience, saying, "Who says wedding photos have to be taken at the wedding? We can do them afterward, it's all the same." Back then, Declan was consumed with guilt and promised her over and over that he would make it up to her. But as work grew more demanding, he never returned to Alaska. The last time he visited was also to say goodbye. At this thought, Declan felt as though his heart was being sliced open, the pain beyond anything words could capture. He resented Clara for not understanding him, resented how she had changed, but what tormented him most was knowing she could never love anyone again. He was left alone in this world, and even the wind could not carry his longing to his departed beloved. He withdrew his gaze and walked through the doors of the Alaska Native Heritage Center. The moment he entered the hall, he saw the statue before which he and Clara had once prayed for a lifetime together. Seeing it, Declan was suddenly transported back to the day after his proposal. They had also entered the Alaska Native Heritage Center and, upon stepping into the hall, bowed before the statue. "God above, today we have pledged to become husband and wife. We ask that you bear witness and bless us with steadfast love and a lifetime together." After their prayer, they even bowed 3 times with genuine devotion. But someone nearby pointed out, "This God does not govern love, only health and longevity." Declan was taken aback and wanted to kneel again to pray for health instead. But Clara smiled and said, "It's fine. As long as the God heard us, that's enough. Maybe everyone else asks for health, and he finds us refreshingly different, so he might just grant our wish." At that, Declan had laughed and called her charmingly clever. He also forgot to pray for health a second time. Looking back now, Perhaps that twist of fate had already sealed their ending. They did not pray for health, so she died young. They prayed for growing old together, yet they could never grow old side by side. Chapter 17. After finishing her visit at the Alaska Native Heritage Center, Declan was just about to leave when a bright young girl with a camera stopped him. "Hey, handsome, could you snap a picture for us?" Declan looked in the direction she pointed and saw that her companions appeared to be around her age, all quite young. He took the camera without objection and, for once, offered them some patient guidance. "If you stand on the slope, you can capture the entire view of the Alaska Native Heritage Center." Then, for just a fleeting moment, Declan glimpsed an unmistakably familiar profile through the lens. A tremor ran through his entire body, and fearing a repeat of last time, he carefully adjusted the focus. As the image slowly grew larger and sharper, Declan's breath caught in his throat. When that beautiful, beaming face appeared vividly in the viewfinder, his fingertips shook and he pressed the shutter. He quickly returned the camera to the girls, his eyes locked on the figures standing beneath the corridor. The girl smiled appreciatively and said, "Thank you." They gathered around to share the photo with their friends, but Declan never heard their murmurs. Why did he take a picture of a pillar? In that instant, Declan felt as though the world before him was rewinding, the wind roaring past his ears, yet he could still hear the pounding of his own heart. It thundered, soared, and carried him to stand before her. Clara. This time, he gripped Clara's wrist tightly. Feeling the soft warmth against his palm, Declan's eyes turned red, slightly bewildered, yet overwhelmed by the joy of recovering what he thought was lost forever. "Clara? Is it really you? You're not dead." Clara tried to pull her hand free but could not break loose, and her expression turned frosty. "Declan, it's only been a few days, and you already can't recognize an old friend. Were you hoping I'd die? You couldn't wait to bring Camille here for a holiday, not even willing to pause for a single moment." Hearing Clara's sharp, biting words, the old Declan would have flared up, but this time he found them endearing. He smiled and pulled Clara into his arms, the terror of the past days finally settling down. "I knew you were too stubborn to die." He spoke softly. "Clara, I'm not leaving anymore." What he had swallowed in silence last time, he finally said aloud this time. "Walk with me once more, along the path where we fell in love." Clara struggled for a moment, her voice breaking with tears. "Then what about Camille?" Declan felt a sharp pang in his chest, realizing that everything before had been his misunderstanding of Clara, and he had wounded her deeply. "I let her go. She will never appear again. It was my fault before, Clara. From start to finish, the only one I ever loved was you." After a long pause, Clara finally answered in a quiet voice. "This time, let me be the one to stay with you." Once the rush of emotion subsided, their feelings gradually cooled. Declan and Clara interlaced their fingers, watching the sun sink behind the western hills. After being estranged for so long, they both understood it could not all be undone in a single moment. "Clara." Declan opened his mouth, wanting to say 1,000 things, yet in the end did not know where to begin. He simply wished, selfishly, that time would freeze at this moment, hoping the wind would carry everything he felt to Clara. As if reading his thoughts, Clara leaned against his shoulder of her own accord. "Have you planned the route to Eklutna Lake?" This time, I refused to be the tour guide. The tension drained from Declan's body, and he broke into a genuine laugh. "I've memorized every detail. Just follow me." After departing the Alaska Native Heritage Center, Declan and Clara headed to downtown Anchorage to find Gabriel. They asked him to look after the two paintings, Embrace at Eklutna Lake and Columbine Sea. He had already restored the Columbine Sea painting, but it needed to be kept from getting too dry and required careful daily maintenance. Back in New York, he had always remembered to run the humidifier and keep the room at the right temperature. But now that he was leaving New York behind for Alaska, the paintings could only be entrusted to Gabriel. Gabriel was thoroughly reliable and agreed at once, nodding as he accepted the task, and even offered a blessing. "Safe travels, Yaki." Throughout the entire exchange, he never once looked at Clara, who stood right beside Declan. Nor did he ask Declan a single question about Clara. Perhaps there was no need to ask, for he had already seen the depth of Declan's devotion in the two lovingly preserved paintings. Chapter 18. On the drive back, Declan was still puzzled by why Gabriel had not acknowledged Clara. But ultimately, worried that Clara might take offense, he chose not to bring up the question of whether they had quarreled. Declan rented a car and set off along the Alaska Highway, heading for Fairbanks. They departed in the afternoon, when the sunlight blazed at its most intense. The brilliant light cascaded from the sky without obstruction, making everything before his eyes look as though it had been filtered with vivid, saturated colors. The tones were so strong they verged on blinding. Even the asphalt road threw back the heat, and if one looked carefully, the air itself seemed to warp in the rising waves. Declan squinted, struggling to make out the road ahead. As he drove, he stole a worried glance at Clara, only to see her barefaced and already wearing sunglasses. A quiet laugh escaped him, and he asked casually, "No makeup today?" Clara tilted her lips into a slight curve. "I was born beautiful. Do I really need makeup?" Watching her return to her vivacious, spirited self, Declan was briefly lost in admiration. Ever since Camille's arrival, they had clashed so many times that all their tenderness had been ground away until only bickering remained. "Declan, eyes on the road." Clara's irritated shout snapped him back, and Declan returned his attention to the shimmering, desolate highway. Yet in that very moment, it felt as though mountain hemlocks had taken root in the barren soil of his heart. After a pause, he smiled with quiet relief, deliberately steering his thoughts away from the painful memories, pretending nothing had ever gone wrong. Just as he reached for his sunglasses, a faint female voice drifted toward him. "Help!" The cry was ethereal, as if carried from somewhere far away. Declan hesitated, his heart trembling inexplicably, and his mind traveled back to the day he first met Clara. It had been a sweltering afternoon, just like this one. He was driving along the highway when he noticed a tiny magenta dot in the distance. From so far away, he could only guess it was someone calling out for help. Without hesitation, he accelerated toward it, and gradually that vivid face came into focus before his eyes. The girl was polite, her voice bright and clear. "Hello. Our car broke down, and the rescue will take ages. Would you mind giving us a ride to the next town?" As the car rolled to a stop, he finally came back to the present and lowered the window. He was not typically the type to get involved in other people's problems, but without a second thought, he agreed. He figured it was either because the day was sweltering or because the girl's radiant smile had dazzled him. He even noticed the girl frowning in frustration and took it upon himself to offer his tow rope. "If you wait for the rescue, it'll be dark by the time they arrive. I'll tow your car to town so you won't have to deal with all that hassle." The girl's face instantly lit up. "Really? Thank you so much. My name is Clara. You're the first kind person I've met all day." Looking at her smile, he felt as though a spring breeze had swept through his heart, and he could not help but smile in return. He said, "My name is Declan." He even pulled out a bouquet of columbines he had just bought from a roadside stall and gave it to her. "Ms. Whitmore, you are also the first person I've met who is as passionate and free-spirited as a columbine." Clara tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled with pressed lips. "Thank you." But he noticed her ears had flushed red. What Clara did not realize was that he, too, was so nervous his hands were clenched tight, and he could hear his own heartbeat falling out of rhythm. Later, Clara liked to call this story, "Good Things Happen to Good People." She also reminded him that if he ever found himself in a similar situation, he must always stop to help. He remembered saying, "Aren't you worried I might rescue another you?" Clara grinned with confidence. "Not at all. I have faith in myself, and in you too." Then she grew serious and said, "More importantly, if you refuse to help out of jealousy, what if you end up costing someone else their life?" Chapter 19. Hearing those words, a bittersweet pang shot through his heart, equal parts moved and sorrowful. Declan glanced sideways at Clara, reached over to hold her hand, and felt a sharp ache bloom in his chest. She had trusted him so completely, and had always been so gentle and kind. Yet he had wounded Clara deeply. Clara flipped the sun visor down, staring at Declan with unmistakable anxiety. "Pull over." Declan hit the brakes on instinct, only then realizing there was indeed a woman up ahead, frantically waving her arms. "Help!" Without a moment's hesitation, Clara stepped out of the car. Noticing that Declan was still sitting inside, she threw him an irritated look. "Quit daydreaming and come help." Once Declan climbed out, he discovered it was not just a single woman. A man was half-propped against a road sign nearby. The man's face was drained of color, his brow creased in pain as he clutched his leg. Declan moved in front of Clara, shielding her from stepping forward, and frowned. What happened? The woman's eyes were puffy from crying, her tears long spent. She spoke in a hurried rush. We're a couple, hiking across Alaska, but about 2 hours ago my boyfriend accidentally tumbled down a grassy slope and may have broken his leg. Could you please help us, sir? Is there any way you could drive us to the nearest county hospital? Clara leaned in and spoke in a soft, reassuring tone. Don't worry, we'll get you to the hospital. The wind and sand whipped fiercely outside, so Declan ushered Clara back into the car, giving her palm a gentle squeeze to comfort her. Wait in the car, I'll handle everything out here. As he spoke, he retrieved the first aid kit from the back seat and said, I have some supplies here. Let me do a basic treatment first. When he looked up, the woman was staring at him with startled eyes. An inexplicable discomfort prickled at him, and he frowned. What's wrong? The man tugged at the woman and shook his head weakly at Declan. Sorry, she's just too worried about me. Declan said nothing, crouched down to examine the man's leg, and was about to speak when he caught himself. The wound had already received basic treatment. The bandage was wrapped with skill, and even the immobilization knots were neat and precise. Though it was not the standard method, it instantly reminded Declan of Clara. She had used this exact kind of knot before. The memory brought a smile to his face, and he put the first aid kit away before opening the car door for them. This bandage is expertly done, and the knot technique is quite distinctive. No additional medicine is necessary. The woman exclaimed excitedly. You recognize this knot? I learned it from a blogger called All. This knot is incredibly useful. Are you a fan of his too? Clara, standing off to the side, lifted her chin ever so slightly, a hint of pride on her face. Declan caught her small gesture and could not help but laugh before answering the woman. I don't watch many videos, so I'm not really familiar with him. It's my wife who enjoys watching his content. He started the engine, and since the subject had come up, Declan found himself talking more than he usually would. Back when my wife first discovered that blogger, I was right there with her. I told her not to bother learning it, thinking, what's the use? I even asked her if she was only watching because the blogger was good looking. But later, when we went hiking and I twisted my ankle, my wife used that very knot to secure it. It held perfectly. She even teased me afterward, saying jealousy was useless, but the knot certainly wasn't. As he spoke, his gaze drifted involuntarily toward Clara again, a trace of nostalgia in his eyes. Clara found it amusing too. You never let me get a word in. The woman looked at them in astonishment. You two look even younger than us, and you're already married. So all the handsome, decent men get snatched up early. Then you. Before she could finish, the man grabbed her wrist, wearing a helpless expression. Stop being so nosy. Have you forgotten your boyfriend is sitting right here? The woman instantly went quiet, offering a sheepish grin. I suppose I lost my head when I saw a handsome face. Chapter 20. The man simply paid her no mind. Declan found the exchange amusing and offered them 2 bottles of water. The woman thanked him right away, then turned back to soothing the man, laying on the charm. Stop being upset. The man was not truly angry. Watching her fumble with the bottle cap for a while made him sigh with fond exasperation. He took the bottle from her, twisted it open, and said, Fine, I'm not upset. But you were just complaining about being tired, so drink some water. Only then did the woman break into a smile and tip her head back to take a long drink. Declan watched their little exchanges through the rearview mirror, found them sweetly endearing, and could not suppress a smile. Clara also turned around, her face bright with envy. You two are absolutely adorable together. At that, the man finally grew a bit self-conscious and offered introductions of his own. I'm Marcus, and this is my wife Lily. We're here on our honeymoon. A wave of nostalgia washed over Declan, and he smiled without a word. It was Clara who kept repeating those 2 names under her breath, then suddenly turned to Declan with a playful grin. Tell me, if I had introduced myself as Lily back then, would you still have looked at me through rose-colored glasses? Declan nearly choked and had not managed to respond. Then Lily could not help but ask, Aren't you already married? Why didn't you bring your wife along to Alaska? Clara fixed Declan with a stare heavy with resentment. You have another wife? Of course not. It has always been only you. Declan sounded a touch helpless, yet willingly bowed his head. But the instant those words left his mouth, a heavy silence swallowed the car. Declan looked up and finally noticed the couple in the back seat pressed tightly together, regarding him with peculiar expressions. Lily's voice quavered slightly as she asked with caution, Who? Who are you speaking to? Declan's expression softened, and he smiled. I haven't introduced you yet. This is my wife, Clara. He even added with a half-joking air, Don't we look like a couple? Everywhere we go, people remark that our features are similar and instantly recognize us as husband and wife. Lily's face shifted abruptly, and she rubbed her arms, shuddering with unease. She seemed about to say more, but Marcus seized her wrist and forced out a dry laugh. They say the longer you live with your partner, the more you resemble each other. Even celebrities are like that. Clara shot him a disdainful look. Who wants to look like you, Declan? Don't flatter yourself. Declan was in good spirits after the teasing. But the lively atmosphere from earlier never returned. They drove the rest of the way in silence until they reached the nearest county town. Declan dropped the two of them off at the county hospital entrance. Concerned that Lily might struggle on her own, he turned to Clara and said, Clara, wait for me in the car, don't wander off. Clara sounded faintly exasperated. I'm not a child, stop worrying about me. She remained entirely oblivious to the fear in Lily and Marcus's eyes as they glanced toward the front passenger seat. Declan went inside with them, and only after the doctor had finished did he prepare to say goodbye. But Marcus called out to him, paused, and said, Brother, I really appreciate what you did today, but I'd strongly suggest you visit a hospital for a checkup as soon as you can. As though afraid Declan might take offense, he quickly added, Even if it's just a routine physical, there's no harm in it. Catching the strange look in their eyes, Declan felt a flicker of irritation rise within him. But he could tell their concern was genuine, so he held himself in check and replied in a low voice, No need to trouble yourselves. Just focus on resting. After Declan left the hospital, the evening sun broke through the clouds and spread its golden light across the earth. The ancient little town radiated a charm all its own. Chapter 21. Declan spotted Clara standing by the car door. A bright smile spread across her rosy, fair face as she waved at him. Declan, look, the sunset. The earth was drenched in golden light, everything before his eyes gilded in warm amber, yet somehow none of it seemed to touch Clara. Lily's terrified question echoed suddenly through his mind. Who are you talking to? A wave of dizziness washed over Declan, and panic clenched his heart without warning. He looked over with anxious eyes. Clara still stood there, arms stretched wide, letting the wind and sand drift through her body and between her fingertips. Clara! Declan rushed forward and pulled her into his arms, only finding calm once he could feel every part of her presence. She patted his back gently to soothe him. What happened? He buried his face in her neck and shook his head. I'm just very happy. Happy that Clara no longer spoke to him with the harsh edge she once had. Happy that even when her words still carried sharpness, there was something endearing woven through them now. Happy that she stayed by his side and was not ill. What Declan failed to notice, however, were the peculiar glances from the people passing around him. Shall we keep going, Declan? Clara asked with a gentle smile, her eyes soft. He took her hand, his gaze lowered toward her, still somewhat lost in thought. Clara, will you leave me? His grip on her hand tightened, and he could not bring himself to hear the answer. Never mind, don't tell me. The moment those words left his lips, he quietly despised his own cowardice. I won't leave you. Clara looked at him and answered with certainty, just as she had 7 years ago on the day they watched golden sunlight bathe Mount Farquhar together. I love you, Declan said. Tears welling in her eyes, Clara threw herself into his embrace and whispered, Declan, I love you. Bathed in the glow of the setting sun, she answered once more, Declan, I won't leave you. Just like before. No petty quarrels, no helplessness over daily necessities, no heart-wrenching arguments remained. Only the tenderness they had shared when they first fell in love. With burning eyes, Declan pressed his forehead to hers and smiled softly, his eyes rimmed with red. Clara, let's go. Benefactor. We forgot to take a photo together. Lily came running out of the hospital, camera still in hand. Declan and Clara stopped at the same moment. Lily hurried to explain, "You're the ninth kind stranger we've met on our honeymoon who was willing to help us out." Sincerity filled her face. "Let's take a picture together. I'm going to write about this in a blog post and share it online. Would that be all right?" Clara's eyes lit up. She tugged at Declan's hand, her voice carrying a playful, pleading tone. "Declan, say yes." Before, Declan might have turned her down. But now, listening to them, he suddenly recalled that Clara once had the very same idea. Lily had already set the camera up. Clara linked arms with her and waved at him, smiling. "Declan, come on." Heat rose behind Declan's eyes, and he replied, "Okay." He stood beside Clara and smiled at the camera. Once the photo was taken, Lily said, "When I get this printed, I'll send you a copy." Declan asked her to mail it to the Art Museum on 8th Street in Anchorage, where an old friend of his worked. The moment they got in the car, Clara began searching for something. As though their minds were connected, Declan handed her a notebook. It was the notebook where Clara had always documented her travels through Alaska. In the past, she would record the people she met and the scenery along the way, storing up memories. But this time, rather than writing as usual, Clara pushed the notebook back into his hands. "From now on, you write for me. Help me keep the memories." Chapter 22. The request caught Declan off guard, and an inexplicable unease settled over him like a wanderer who could not find his way home. His throat felt dry. "Why?" he asked. "You always handled these things yourself before. Why let me record them this time?" Clara smoothed the furrow between his brows, clearly amused by his nervous expression. "What's going through your head? This time I'm here with you. So naturally it should be you keeping the record." A barely perceptible sigh of relief escaped Declan. Yet he still seemed to be searching for confirmation, his eyes locked on Clara's as he spoke again. "Is that all?" He did not even realize that his deliberate avoidance had built an invisible wall between them. Clara held his hand and replied with quiet certainty. His heart softened, and he set off. They reached Fairbanks before nightfall, planning to rest for the evening and head to Denali in the morning. By happy coincidence, they managed to book the very same hotel where they had once stayed together. Clara lay on the soft, spacious bed, which did not shift in the slightest beneath her. She rubbed her stomach, glanced at him sideways with anticipation in her eyes. "Let's go get salmon burgers later." Setting the luggage down, Declan smiled indulgently. "All right." After leaving the hotel, he ordered 2 salmon burgers, and the flavor was exactly as they remembered. When it came time to pay, the owner asked politely, "Would you like your salmon burgers wrapped to go?" Declan shook his head, paid the bill, and left with Clara. Watching his retreating figure, the owner cleared the table with a puzzled look. Not a single bite was taken from this plate. What a waste. Side by side, they strolled down the busy street, and Clara let out a helpless sigh. "I should have let you finish mine earlier." A smile tugged at the corners of Declan's mouth, as if a particular memory amused him. "Have you forgotten how you used to hate wasting food? You forced yourself to eat everything, then ended up needing a shot at night because of the stomachache." Color flooded Clara's cheeks, and she rose on tiptoe to press her hand over his mouth. She looked thoroughly exasperated. "Stop talking." Declan slipped his arm around her waist and smiled with patient warmth. "All right, not another word." The night deepened around them as they walked close together, reflections of each other caught in their eyes, their breaths slowly mingling. Declan's Adam's apple moved as he gradually lowered his head. Just before their lips could meet, Clara came to her senses and pushed him back. "Declan, be careful." She ducked her head, the tips of her ears so flushed they looked as if they might bleed. Snapping out of his daze, Declan noticed passers-by watching him with rather odd expressions. He cleared his throat, swallowed the awkward feeling, and reached for Clara's hand. "We've been married for years. I'll be more careful next time." Clara shot him an annoyed look, but did not release his hand. As they continued down the street together, Declan's thoughts drifted to 5 years earlier when they had come to Alaska. Clara had spent half a month preparing in advance, brimming with excitement to see Ruth Glacier at Denali. But on the day they were supposed to go, an urgent work call pulled him away at the last minute, and in the end he could not make it. Clara had been visibly disappointed, and knowing he was in the wrong, he promised to take her another time. Yet on their last trip to Alaska, she never brought it up, and with everything else going on, the promise slipped his mind entirely. So they never stopped at Denali. "Declan, Look over there. Clara shook his hand excitedly, pointing at a stall nearby. Jolted from his thoughts, Declan followed her to a vendor selling bead bracelets. She pointed at one of the bracelets and smiled up at him. Do you remember? We bought beads here once before too. Declan smiled back. Of course I remember. Chapter 23. That time, Clara had chosen a string of red agate beads, hoping to buy 2 identical couple bracelets, but a matching pair could not be found. He had not understood her persistence and said impatiently, "Just pick any 2. It doesn't matter." He even hurried her along, telling her she was wasting time. The joy drained from Clara's face at once, and she sulked with him for quite some time afterward. But later he came to understand that the point of a journey was never about ticking off one destination after another. What truly mattered was savoring every moment spent with her. He was there to be by her side. It made no difference where they went or what they did. Reflecting on all of this, guilt toward Clara swelled inside Declan, and his heart ached in steady waves. He was just about to buy a matching bracelet. Is this the one you're looking for? The vendor offered him the exact string of beads he remembered. Clara looked delighted and grabbed Declan's arm. Declan, what luck! For a moment, Declan stood stunned, absent-mindedly accepting the beads, while Clara's laughter drifted near and far through his ears. He knew he should feel happy, yet a prickling sadness inexplicably stung his nose. His gaze lingered on the excited Clara, his throat dry. Don't you blame me? Clara tilted her head, puzzlement on her face. Why would I blame you? Even as she spoke, she happily leaned into Declan, held out her wrist, and shook the beads with pure delight. Under the warm yellow light, her complexion looked soft and gentle, just the way it always had. It's wonderful, Declan. We have couple bracelets now. We really are lucky. Declan clenched his fist tightly around the beads, while an identical string lay hidden in his pocket. The words came out with difficulty. Yes, we really are lucky. The vendor kept frowning at him, and at last sighed and shook his head. Poor man. Snapping back to the present, Declan realized he had not caught the words clearly. He pushed down the emotions churning inside him and finally thought to ask the vendor, "How did you know this was the one I wanted?" The vendor's expression did not change. He simply smiled, then pulled out his phone and brought up Clara's Instagram. She's your wife, isn't she? A few years back, the 2 of you came to buy beads and even got into an argument about them. But afterward, she quietly came back and found me, and we added each other on WhatsApp. She did her own research on the beads. Only this particular kind could bring safety and health. The materials were difficult to source, so I told her I'd make one and mail it once I had everything. I never forgot my promise. I just didn't expect to run into you right after finishing it. Instinctively, Declan turned to look at Clara, but the confusion in her eyes sent his heart into a heavy, lurching beat. By the way, where is your wife? The vendor hesitated for a long time before finally voicing the question. Clara paused, waved at the vendor, and said, "I'm right here, aren't I?" As she spoke, her mood seemed to dim slightly. A dull throb pulsed through Declan's head. He seized Clara's hand, and his expression darkened. "This is my wife. You have her WhatsApp, so there's no reason to treat her like this." He set a few bills on the counter and walked away with Clara, his face cold. Even after they returned to the hotel, Declan's mood had not lifted. Clara smiled at him with determined optimism and pressed the beads he had set aside back into his hand. "Don't be upset. These beads can still bring health." Declan closed his eyes, and all the fierce emotions inside him dissolved into stillness. Slowly opening his eyes, he drew Clara's hand toward him, settled her onto his lap, wound his arms tightly around her waist, and rested his head against her back. "Clara, do you think if I had gotten the matching bracelet that year, things might have turned out differently? If I hadn't misunderstood you, if I hadn't looked after Camille's family, if..." Clara wrapped her arms around his head, her gentle voice barely above a whisper. "Declan, we were just a little unlucky. I don't blame you. As long as we're both healthy, that's enough." Declan went still, his heart plunging as endless despair and pain swallowed him whole. "Clara, never leave me." She held him tightly, and together they sank into the endless night. Declan, we'll always be together. Chapter 24. Early the next morning, Declan drove Clara to the base camp at Denali. They changed into their climbing gear. Watching Clara bundle herself up tightly, he pinched her cheek with amusement. "If you were walking among the penguins in Antarctica right now, Not a single one would suspect you weren't part of the group. Clara glared at him. He helped her adjust the goggles, the faint smile at the corner of his mouth slowly fading. Sorry. Everything was so last minute this trip. All the gear was bought at the foot of the mountain. It's not nearly as well prepared as what you had before. Clara tilted her head, her eyes curving into a smile. Why have you been apologizing so much lately? Declan offered no explanation, simply taking her hand and heading up the mountain. They followed the climbing team, roped together, their footsteps uneven and deep in the snow. Clara, can you keep going? He kept glancing back at her behind him. Her goggles were coated in snow, and she shook her head. Declan paused, remembering that during their last Alaska trip, Clara had looked pale and even taken medication for altitude sickness. But after that, a sudden, dull ache struck his head, and the memory of what happened next refused to surface. By the time they struggled to the halfway point, his breathing had grown labored and heavy. Declan, his leg buckled beneath him, and he dropped to one knee, gasping for air. Never before had he felt so acutely how difficult the simple act of breathing could be. With each gain in altitude, it only worsened. Clara pulled off her goggles. Worry etched across her face as she tried to help him up. Declan, are you all right? He looked at her face, reddened by cold and concern, and lifted his hand to touch it. I'm fine. Don't worry. Forcing himself upright, his head spinning, a memory surfaced in his daze. Clara had not been taking altitude sickness medication at all. It was cancer medication and antidepressants. A friend's words came back to him. If someone is that seriously ill, they'd be suffering from altitude sickness constantly. How could she still travel to Alaska? Her willpower must be extraordinary. Declan struggled to keep pace with the team as wind and snow howled through the mountains, screaming across the ridges. The world dissolved into a vast, featureless white. Every sense of direction vanished, and an infinite loneliness closed in around him. Clara. He reached back and seized her wrist, his eyes flooded with panic and helplessness. Her lively eyes were now trained on him, brimming with worry. Declan, don't scare me. What's wrong with you? His heart plummeted without reason, a tide of pain sweeping through him. He understood then that his heart was already riddled with wounds. Clara, the you standing before me right now, you love me, don't you? Slowly he raised his hand, his fingertips trembling as they reached for her. Clara answered without a moment's hesitation. Love. Declan, I love you. A smile lit her face, her eyes full of undisguised concern and affection. Heaviness pressed down on Declan's chest. Clara was smiling, telling him she loved him, right there in front of him. Yet everything still felt impossibly distant, as though it were a dream. Under the grip of altitude sickness, the desire to climb left Declan entirely. He could not go on. All he wanted was to let himself fall. He stared at the world, now a single featureless color, his strength drained, his eyes slowly closing. Through his fading consciousness, Clara's anxious, furious voice reached him. Declan, are you insane? You have altitude sickness. Use the oxygen now. A faint smile curved Declan's lips. He wanted to open his eyes, but the strength had gone from him entirely. He could not tell how much time had passed, but when Declan woke again, he was already in the hospital. The sharp smell of disinfectant needled his senses over and over. Clara. Chapter 25. Declan's awake. You stay here and keep an eye on him. I'll go get the doctor. At the unfamiliar voice, Declan turned his head instinctively. He recognized the two girls from Eklutna Lake, the ones who had taken photos of him and Clara. Momentarily stunned, he managed, Where's Clara? His voice came out rough and barely audible. When both girls froze, his gaze swept the hospital room, but only the three of them were there. At that moment, the team leader walked in with the doctor. He appeared not to notice the strange atmosphere in the room, hovering nervously as the doctor examined Declan. Man, you really gave us a scare. You had altitude sickness and didn't say a word about it. Lucky for you, these two girls spotted you in time, and their boyfriends carried you back down. The two girls waved their hands quickly, though worry filled their eyes. We just happened to notice him. We had no idea it would be such a coincidence. The doctor spoke up. The patient hasn't been resting properly and is somewhat anemic, which triggered the altitude sickness. He needs to take it easy for the next several days. After a long silence, Declan raised his bloodshot eyes. The girl traveling with me is my wife. Did any of you see where she went? Oh, Clara came too? How come I didn't see her? One of the girls spoke up with evident surprise. The team leader looked equally baffled. You did register 2 people at the time, and one was named Clara, right? But we've been on the trail for half a day, and I haven't seen anyone matching that description. Man, are you certain your wife was here? Declan's expression turned ugly, and his fists clenched as he stared the man down. What are you talking about? He ripped the 4 needle from the back of his hand, climbed out of bed, and searched everywhere for Clara, consumed by an overwhelming terror. The truth he dared not confront, and the faith crumbling beneath him tormented him with every passing second. Clara, Clara. Both girls grew frantic. Declan, it really was just you. If Clara had been there, we absolutely would have brought her down from the mountain with you. The snowy mountain? Every trace of color drained from Declan's face. Yes, the snowy mountain. Clara must still be up there. She's not in good health. I have to go save her. He snatched up his phone, but his trembling fingers could not manage to dial the rescue number. It felt as though an invisible hand was squeezing his heart, the pain nearly suffocating him. Clara, please hold on a little longer. In the end, the doctor administered a sedative to calm him. Declan lay on the hospital bed, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, pupils dilated, consciousness completely blurred. In the darkness, he dreamed of Clara. He felt like a bystander, watching everything unfold before him. He saw Clara going to the hospital alone for consultations, treatments, buying her own medicine. He watched the doctor look at her gravely and say, "Your condition is extremely serious. You must be admitted for chemotherapy right away." He saw Clara, her face drained of all color, shake her head. "Doctor, just tell me how much time I have." After a long sigh, the doctor answered slowly, "Conservatively, 1 month." Clara sat alone on a hospital bench, staring silently at her test results, her body slowly folding over, trembling from head to toe. People streamed past in every direction, all accompanied by their families, but no one paid any attention to Clara weeping in the corner. A sharp, sudden pain tore through Declan's chest, an indescribable anguish radiating from his heart to every corner of his body. Clara. He walked forward slowly, his trembling fingers reaching out to hold her, but they passed straight through her body. Declan froze. He watched Clara's ashen face break into a look of quiet relief as she wiped away her tears and slowly walked away. He watched her leave, and a surge of panic overtook him. Desperately, he tried to grab hold of her. Clara. Declan's eyes flew open, and he found himself staring into Clara's worried face. Chapter 26. You're finally awake. Do you realize you were in a coma for 3 days? Were you trying to worry me to death? Dissatisfaction laced Clara's words, but her eyes were full of concern. She looked at Declan, brows slightly drawn, a trace of anger sharpening her tone. Why are you spacing out? Did all that sleeping make you stupid? If you get altitude sickness again in the future. Clara, I'm sorry. Before she could finish, Declan pulled her into a tight embrace. He held her firmly against him, his face pressed into her shoulder. A small laugh escaped him, but no warmth reached his eyes. Clara, what am I supposed to do with you? Where did you go? They told me I was the only one who went to Denali, that I hadn't brought you along. How could I not bring you? I was terrified I'd left you behind on the mountain. Thank goodness you showed up. Clara lifted her hand and stroked his back gently, all her anger dissolving away. I went to buy medicine. Did you have a nightmare? She patted the back of his head softly. Nothing to be afraid of. Just like smoothing a cat's fur. Tears filled Declan's eyes instantly and streamed down his face. Not long after, the hospital room door swung open, and a stranger walked in, a doctor. He introduced himself right away. No need to worry, I'm a neurologist. Clara patted the back of Declan's hand reassuringly. Take your treatment seriously, or I'll stop paying any attention to you. Declan looked somewhat helpless, but in the end he nodded obediently. I know. Don't worry. Something shifted in the neurologist's gaze as he studied him. I hear you went to Denali with your wife. Is she here with you right now? Declan frowned, finding the question oddly pointed for no reason he could name. Still, he answered honestly. Yes, every time I come to Alaska, it's with her. The neurologist then asked Declan a long series of questions about Clara, and with each answer, his expression changed further. He composed himself at last and wrote out prescriptions for several bottles of medication. You must take them on schedule, or your health will only deteriorate. You wouldn't want your wife to worry, would you? Declan, who had been ready to refuse, found himself with nothing to say. Before leaving, the doctor gave Clara a nod, his expression complicated as a quiet greeting. Clara stifled a laugh from the side. Declan glanced her way, and she immediately straightened her face into a look of perfect seriousness. Did you hear what the doctor said? Medicine on time. I'll be watching. The tension that had gripped Declan's features eased, and seeing Clara so animated, he could not help but smile. All right, I'll do as you say. After all, you are my wife. Color bloomed across Clara's cheeks, and she shot him a glare. Just then, two girls walked in carrying food. The moment they saw Declan was awake, their faces lit up. You're finally up. Clara smiled and waved at them. The two girls acted as though they could not see her, sat down, and began chatting quietly with Declan. He sent Clara a pleading look, but still remembered to express his gratitude. Thank you for saving me on Denali. They waved off his thanks without a second thought. As long as you're all right, that's all that matters. One of the girls thought for a moment before voicing the question anyway. Why haven't we seen Clara? The other girl grew a bit nostalgic, smiling as she recalled. You know, we only managed to find boyfriends because of Clara. We still want her to meet them. After all, if Clara could end up with someone like Declan, it proves she has excellent taste. The smile on Declan's face froze, lingering there for a long, long time. Long enough that the atmosphere in the room slowly grew stagnant. His gaze drifted to Clara, whose expression was sinking into deeper and deeper despondency. He turned back to the girls, forcing a smile. Are you still teasing me? My wife has been right here beside me the whole time. Chapter 27. The smiles on the two girls' faces froze, and they looked momentarily stunned. But as though something occurred to them, the flicker of fear lasted only an instant before vanishing. They exchanged a quick glance, then, without any coordination at all, greeted in two completely different directions. Clara, long time no see. Sorry about earlier. Clara could not help but laugh. These two little sisters are just too adorable. The heaviness weighing on Declan's heart lifted with their comical display. After chatting for a while, one of the girls rummaged through her bag and finally pulled out a consecrated thanka. I originally got this for myself, but more than anything, I hope you and Clara stay healthy and that everything goes smoothly for you. Something trembled deep inside Declan. He suddenly grasped the meaning behind what Will had once told him. Though people leave, their souls are eternal. It turned out that every person who had ever crossed paths with Clara carried a fragment of her memory. To meet again was to remember again. And those memories, once stirred, carried him back to the past. After Declan was discharged, they all shared a seafood boil together. One of the girls could not help but lament, what a shame. The weather was perfect last time, but we never got to see the golden sunlight on Mount Farquhar. Declan thought for a moment, then offered, if you didn't get to see it, why not try dancing? The snowy peaks might be moved enough to reveal a glimpse of the Golden Mountain. He said it with such seriousness that no one laughed at him. Instead, the girl grinned and replied, if we dance and still don't see it, we'll come back to find you. Clara covered her mouth and laughed, casting a gleeful look at Declan. Making such a solemn promise, that's so typical of you. Not the slightest fear of failure. Declan only smiled without a word. But his mind returned to the 2 times Clara had danced at the foot of Mount Farquhar. Next time, if she danced again, they would see it for certain. He kept the thought to himself. When it finally came time to part, one of the girls waved at him through her tears. Declan, you and Clara must take care of yourselves. The car pulled away from the highway, kicking up a trail of dust and gravel that scattered on the wind. Yet the girl's blessing lingered on. Along that empty road, in the barren wilderness, a stranger's kind words sounded especially beautiful. Declan gripped Clara's hand, about to get in the car, when he noticed the girl had left her shawl behind. Clara's eyes widened with surprise. Isn't that the one I gave away? A warm light shone in her gaze as she smiled. It's a memory from our journey. Let's take good care of it. Declan smiled and agreed, tucked the shawl away, and continued the journey with Clara. He climbed Denali once more, and this time he got his wish. They saw Ruth Glacier and the boundary marker. Clara was overcome with excitement and threw her arms around Declan, nearly moved to tears. Declan, look. This is our memory. For a moment, Declan was dazzled by the brightness of her smile. The figure before him gradually merged with the desperate, thin Clara from his dreams. In the blink of an eye, no one was there. Only the cold boundary marker remained. Clara. His heart seized, and he stared with wide, terrified eyes. The team leader clapped him on the shoulder and asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Declan was momentarily dazed. Then Clara appeared again from behind the boundary marker, waving at him with a smile. "Declan, stop daydreaming. Let's take a photo together." Looking at Clara, Declan tiredly pinched the bridge of his nose and told himself it had only been his imagination. He asked the team leader to help take a photo. He stood to Clara's left, tilting his head slightly to lean against hers. Chapter 28. After leaving Denali, they traveled to Keystone Canyon. Everywhere they stopped, they would ask passers-by to take a photo of them together, yet every time they were met with peculiar looks. Declan never paid it any mind. His only concern was that Clara might feel hurt. Fortunately, the two of them had eyes only for each other. They wandered and lingered along the way, making their way through all of southern Alaska. At last, as the new year drew near, they arrived in Wasilla. A chapel sat on the mountainside here, and it was said to house the spirit of the god of reincarnation. Despite the driving wind and snow, Declan wanted to climb the mountain and pay his respects. But he could not stand the thought of Clara suffering alongside him, so he asked her to stay at the inn at the foot of the mountain. Clara held his hand, her expression strangely distant, though she managed to smile. "Will you come back?" A sudden stab of pain pierced Declan's heart, and he leaned down to kiss Clara's forehead. "Clara, what's gotten into you today? Since you're right here, of course I'll come back." Clara did not explain. She stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to the corner of his mouth, Declan's reflection shining in her eyes. "Declan, I will always wait for you here," she said. Panic rose without warning inside him, as though something were slipping through his fingers. He wanted to grasp it, but it was like trying to hold the wind. When he opened his palm, there was nothing. In the rearview mirror, Declan watched Clara's figure grow smaller and smaller. He pushed down his unease and drove up the mountain. Once he reached the top, his car sank into a snow pit. By chance, he met a priest about to return to the chapel. The priest helped push the car free, but the road back down was blocked by drifts, so he had no choice but to stay and wait for the snow to melt. The courtyard was small, home to only a shaman and a young disciple, and they worshipped a single deity. A restless worry took hold of Declan, and he kept stealing glances at the sky. The wind and snow showed no sign of stopping, so he remained on the mountain. "Benefactor, I've noticed you looking outside for quite some time. Are you anxious to go back down?" Declan felt hollowed out inside, threaded through with unease. When the concerned young disciple caught his eye, he hesitated but finally nodded. "My wife is still waiting for me at the foot of the mountain. I'm afraid she'll worry." The young disciple shook his head with gentle curiosity. "Why not simply make a phone call? Since you live in the mortal world, you should solve things by mortal means." For a moment, Declan was taken aback. Yes, why hadn't he just called? He pulled out his phone and stared at the call screen. Yet for some reason, he could not bring himself to press the button. Fate begins and ends as it will. There are many lovesick souls in this world. Benefactor, do not trap yourself among them. The shaman sighed from somewhere behind him, his voice measured and slow. Declan's expression hardened, and he clenched his fist to suppress the anger rising within him. What do you mean by that? He was desperate to know, yet deep down, he dared not face the truth. The shaman said only, "Go back to where it all began. That is your true destination." In the end, Declan never made that phone call. Clinging to a vague thread of hope, he waited on the mountain without hesitation, waiting for the snow to stop and the sun to rise. Each day, he rose early with the young disciple to recite scriptures, meditated in the evening, drank butter tea, and ate vegetarian meals, finding a surprising sense of peace. The young disciple admired his composure. "You seem well suited to cultivate in the chapel. Master says you have something weighing on your mind. Perhaps the chapel can ease it." Declan neither agreed nor disagreed, offering no response. Until at last the snow stopped and sunlight bathed the earth, bringing a trace of warmth with it. The shaman spoke one final thing to him. "If you remember, the one you long for will never perish. Longing will cross all distances and reach the farthest place." Chapter 29. Shaken to his core, Declan bowed deeply to the shaman, then turned and descended the mountain. He made his way back to the inn at the foot of the slope. Standing before his room, he drew a deep breath and pushed the door open. Everything inside was clean, tidy, and spotless. Clara sat quietly by the window, her gaze turned toward the world outside. Clara, heat rushed behind Declan's eyes, and all his unease settled back into place. Have you been waiting long? He pushed aside everything that felt wrong, seeing only the figure in front of him. Clara turned around and fixed him with a glare. You finally came back. Do you have any idea how long I waited at the foot of the mountain? A ripple of pain stirred through Declan's chest. He stepped forward, pinched her cheek, and pressed his forehead gently to hers. I know. I'm sorry I was late. Under his gentle coaxing, Clara's anger could not hold. An eager note crept into her voice. I've already picked our last stop. Let's go to the dunes, shall we? Declan smiled indulgently and agreed. That night, they held each other close, gazing at the sky beyond the window. Even with his beloved in his arms, even walking the very path of love, Declan still felt as though endless waves were dragging him into the deep sea, leaving him without a harbor. Clara, I love you. Clara, nestled against him, had already fallen into a deep sleep and did not answer. A faint smile crossed Declan's lips. He wished he could sink forever into this journey. The next morning, they set off for their destination. Strangely, there was no snow here. At first glance, it could have been the middle of late autumn. The locals were celebrating the new year, and the festive atmosphere was especially vibrant. Clara excitedly pulled him into a shop, and when they emerged, both were wearing guspucks. Declan, look. Now we can blend right in and ring in the new year too. She spun around, beaming, her skirt swirling like fluttering butterflies, dazzling and beautiful. For a moment, Declan was transfixed. He wanted to smile, but a ridiculous thought flashed through his mind. He should not have taken the medicine. At that instant, he did not even have the courage to reach out and touch her. They climbed the mountain, where the leaves had turned yellow and withered, yet alpine flowers still bravely pushed their way through. The sight carried Declan's thoughts back to Mount Farquhar, to the time when golden sunlight had flooded the mountains. But now the setting sun hid behind clouds, the sky was gray, and the view held no beauty. Only the red guspucks they wore brought vivid color into the world. Clara danced, and with every movement Declan's anxiety deepened, afraid that in the blink of an eye she would turn into a butterfly and drift away. Clara, forcing down his unease, Declan took her hand, smiled at her, and spoke. Clara, will you teach me some simple steps? This time, I'll dance for you. She laughed. All right. As the sun sank behind the western hills, the distant snowy mountains stretched out like a magnificent scroll painting. Beneath the overcast sky they danced together, the breeze as their companion, the chirping of insects and birds their music, and in that vast world it seemed they had only each other. On the alpine grassland, they poured everything they had into the space between them, their hearts beating as one. Declan hoped the setting sun would break through the clouds and light up the mountains. Clara watched his clumsy movements in silence, without laughter, only calm. Declan, I love you too. Heat flooded Declan's eyes. He tried to smile, but his tears scattered in the wind. He did not stop dancing, yet watched helplessly as his beloved faded before his eyes, dissolving into the landscape. Here, the wind was her, the clouds were her, the chirping of insects and birds was her. The dream ended, the clouds parted, the sunlit mountains appeared behind him, but he had lost Clara forever. Chapter 30. By the time he returned to downtown Anchorage, 2 years had already passed. Gabriel saw Declan, whose skin had darkened several shades, and barely recognized him. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, How have you been? Declan tugged faintly at the corners of his mouth, something almost nostalgic in the gesture. I've found where I belong. I won't be leaving again. Gabriel was taken aback. Declan did not elaborate. He went to look at the 2 paintings, which Gabriel had cared for faithfully. Their colors remained vivid. He gazed at Clara with wings, longing written across his face, yet shadowed by pain. Only after many years had he come to understand everything about Clara. No matter how desperately one tried, some people could never be kept. Gabriel let out a quiet sigh. A great many people have loved these 2 paintings. I told them the stories behind them, and every one of them asked me to pass on the same message to you. Live well. Declan's breath caught for a moment. He smiled, but the life had gone out of it, and he did not take the paintings. Here is the best home for them. Gabriel did not refuse, promising to keep them forever until the destined owner came along. Declan resigned from his position in New York and disposed of all his assets. When Camille learned what he had done, she traveled to Alaska again to find him. Declan, why are you liquidating everything? Aren't you coming back? Are you abandoning me? She had taken it for granted that once Clara was gone, Declan would eventually fall for someone else, and that she still had a chance. Declan looked at her, devoid of any emotion, and pressed play on Margot's recording. Even after hearing Margot's words, Camille showed not a trace of remorse. My mother doesn't represent me, Declan. You can't be a coward in love. Seeing her relentless insistence, Declan let out a sudden, hollow laugh. With a note of irony and self-mockery, he said, "Was it because of you that I misunderstood Clara again and again? If you insist on clinging to me, I don't mind laying Clara's death at your feet and taking my revenge." The color drained from Camille's face, and she was struck speechless. Declan had no desire to remain entangled with her and walked away. He went to Clara's tombstone one last time. The mountain hemlocks stood tall around it, their branches lush and green, offering shelter from wind and rain. Keeping her company were the trees of the plateau, every one of them unrelated to him. He smiled, but his eyes held no life. He had known for a long time that he was ill. Clara was a figment of his imagination, a way he had tried to convince himself she was still there. But he had overlooked that the Clara he conjured was the one who had once loved him, not the Clara who had argued with him time after time until she had nothing left to give. How could she still say she loved him? He had only been deceiving himself. "Clara, I won't have a tombstone after I die." He drew a deep breath, pressed down the weight in his chest, and continued. "Let me be selfish just this once. I've already made a will. My ashes will be buried beside you, and a mountain hemlock will be planted over them. As long as its leaves stay green, it means I am always with you. Rustle." The leaves shimmered, the branches swayed gently, and through his daze he saw Clara lift the corners of her mouth at him, just as she always had. Declan had long since exhausted his tears. He forced a smile, though his eyes were full of pain. "Clara, I'll take that as your agreement." After settling everything, he returned to St. Michael's Cathedral. Since non-Alaskans were not accepted as residents, Declan became a volunteer, copying the Bible alongside the priest in the chapel. He visited her urn often, gazed at the portrait of his beloved, and listened to the chanting beside her. In time, everyone came to know the man who had chosen to stay there of his own free will, keeping vigil beside the one he loved. He lived among the priests and believers, praying and chanting each day, wishing for a life alongside her in whatever came next.
Book 2. Chapter 1. Peter Chase's beloved Laura Lynn died on my operating table. For someone as cold and menacing as Peter, it was unexpected when he protected me, even going so far as to propose marriage. Afterward, he seemed to lose his mind, showering me with affection so intense that it felt suffocating. He took me to eat fiery hot pot that set my throat ablaze. He forced me to try heart-stopping bungee jumps. He dragged me to raucous and dangerous bars in the middle of the night to drink until I couldn't stand. These actions triggered my stomach cancer. In the late stages of my illness, I stumbled upon a diary he had carelessly left behind at home. Its pages revealed the truth. Everything he had done, every activity, every torment, was pulled straight from Laura's diary, a list of things she had once dreamed of doing with him. On the final page, his words dripped with hatred. "She deserves to die." And so I did. I died the day Laura's fake death was exposed. I died the day Peter discovered she had staged her death just to escape him and marry someone else. Peter should be satisfied now, right? When I fell, the fish tank shattered and a shard of glass sliced through the artery in my neck. At that moment, all I felt was relief. As my blood pooled around me, my thoughts froze on the glowing screen of my phone. A message from my colleague, Dr. Voss, had just come in. "Laura isn't dead. Your surgery wasn't a failure. The Lynn family framed you, faking her death to send her abroad. So, I didn't kill her after all. As I closed my eyes, tears burned their way down my cheeks. 5 years of torment, all for nothing. I didn't know whether to mourn my wasted life or pity Peter, trapped in the agony of losing someone he never truly had. Laura's surgery had destroyed everything for me. My career, my confidence, my life, all gone. It turned out that it was nothing more than her twisted game. Today was the day of my death, and it also happened to be her extravagant wedding day. A few days ago, I had noticed Peter staring at an image in the news. He zoomed in and out, over and over again, his eyes rimmed red. A tear slid down his face, so faint that it was barely noticeable. I had been holding my stomach medication, ready to take it, when he suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Why are you still pretending? Laura died of stomach cancer. Now you've got it, too. You copy her in everything. Why not copy her death, too?" He slapped the pills out of my hand. The capsules rolled to his feet. He crushed them under his shoe, grinding them into powder. Then he brought out a steaming bowl of scorching hot spicy soup, insisting I drink it. The heat clawed at my already fragile stomach. I couldn't hold it down and vomited everything back up. Disgusted, he shoved me aside and stormed out of the villa. After he left, I glanced at the news photo on his screen. The person getting married in a lavish ceremony, glowing in a stunning white wedding dress, was Laura. Her face was unforgettable. Laura, who was supposed to have died on my operating table, now stood arm in arm with her handsome groom, smiling radiantly for the cameras. She even joked during an interview, "The first thing I did when I came back was eat a spicy hot pot. I missed it so much while I was abroad." Her dimples were soft, and her laughter was infectious. But at the mention of hot pot, I felt my body tremble. After her supposed death, Peter had made me eat hot pot almost every day. For a whole year, I choked down the fiery dishes despite hating spicy food. Every time I protested, saying I couldn't take it anymore, Peter didn't argue. He just ate silently, watching me with a faint smile. That smile carried a message I understood all too well. If it weren't for your failure, Laura wouldn't have died on the operating table. If it weren't for me shielding you, you'd never practice medicine again. So I forced myself to eat. One agonizing meal after another. The guilt kept me up at night. It gnawed at my confidence and made me doubt my skills. I couldn't step into an operating room again. Every time I saw someone lying on that cold, square table, I saw Laura's lifeless face. I remembered the trust in her eyes as she signed the consent form, saying she was putting her life in my hands. And then, the death certificate that came instead. For 5 years, those memories haunted me. They broke me. But today, I was finally free. As I closed my eyes for the last time, the pain faded away. What I didn't expect was that my restless soul would follow him to Laura's grand wedding. Book 2. Chapter 2. Peter was also invited. He sat in the front row, dressed in his favorite tailored suit, watching the woman who used to look at him like he was her entire world walk toward someone else. His dark, brooding eyes betrayed his crumbling composure as he continuously twisted his wedding ring. Then, when no one was paying attention, he discreetly slipped off the band that symbolized our marriage. At that moment, Laura's gaze met his. Their eyes locked and unspoken emotions swirled between them, emotions too tangled and complex to define. Peter let out a mocking laugh. "Why are you crying, Ms. Lynn? It's your wedding day." Laura, astonishingly, wrapped her arms around Peter in front of her groom. In that moment, I couldn't help but think how awkward her new husband must have felt, probably just as awkward as I did watching this scene unfold. Their so-called love was sickening, as if everyone else outside their twisted dynamic was nothing but a fool for their amusement. Laura quickly pulled away from the embrace, looking at Peter with a calm expression. "You'll always be my best friend," she said softly. With those words, she set their boundaries once more, firmly staking her position. Peter, however, couldn't bring himself to say the words he had wanted to say to her. The ceremony was long and grand. When Laura held her new husband's hand and vowed to stay with him forever, Peter's body trembled with rage. His hands clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, leaving deep marks, but he refused to let go. His phone screen still displayed our wedding photo as the wallpaper. He glanced down at it momentarily, only to see the desperate message I had sent him before I died, a plea for help he had ignored. He swiped it away without hesitation. Of course, to him, everything I did was always wrong. When the wedding ceremony concluded and the dinner party began, Peter drowned himself in one glass of red wine after another. People around him tried to intervene. "Stop drinking so much. You don't want to make Laura uncomfortable." What happened back then, none of us really understood. Maybe you should find a chance to talk to Laura and clear things up. Yeah, you and Laura had over 10 years of history. You punished Lily for 5 whole years because of her. How could Laura treat you like this? So, everyone knew. Everyone knew that Peter's so-called love for me had been nothing but a series of punishments and torment. I was the only one too blind to see it. I watched as Peter lowered his head, tears brimming in his eyes, clutching his wine glass as he approached the newlyweds for a toast. For the first time in years, I felt a small flicker of satisfaction. It had been 5 years, but nothing I did, no amount of devotion, ever moved him. But now a mere toast at a wedding was enough to unravel him. As he left, Peter dialed my number. Naturally, no one answered. His lackey, Quinn Adler, snorted beside him. "Lily? She dares to throw a tantrum with you? Peter, we ought to teach her a lesson." Peter immediately booked a hotel room and blocked my number. He scoffed coldly. If it weren't for her, Laura and I would never have ended up like this. What right does she have to be angry? Every time she throws a fit, she ends up crawling back to apologize. Between the two of us, I've always had the upper hand. If I hadn't genuinely believed that Laura's death was my fault, I would never have surrendered so much, my pride, my career, all sacrificed for a man who never loved me. Quinn, ever the instigator, leaned in with a sly grin. "You're in such a bad mood because of her. Why not mess with her a bit? The boys are bored anyway." Even as a disembodied soul, I still felt a deep, visceral disgust for Quinn. Over these past 5 years, one memory of him stood out vividly. He had once called me to a bar, lying that Peter was drunk and needed help. That night, I narrowly escaped assault. When I told Peter about it, he dismissed it entirely, calling me dramatic and insisting it was just a joke. After that, Peter and Quinn grew closer. Every time there was a gathering, Quinn was there. And every single time, Quinn would bring up Laura, praising her endlessly and forcing me to drink. If it weren't for Dr. Hayes's brilliant medical skills, Laura might not have died so tragically. Laura had to die for Dr. Hayes to get what she wanted. We all know what happened. No need to spell it out, right? He painted me as a murderer, as someone who had deliberately caused Laura's death. And Peter? Peter would sit there in judgment, towering over me like some self-righteous arbiter. Medicine had once been my pride. But after enduring repeated humiliation and abuse, I lost all confidence in myself and in the profession I had loved. My retreat was seen as guilt, as proof of my culpability. Everyone believed that I had caused Laura's death. 5 years of torment, both mental and physical, only to discover it had all been one massive lie. Now, Peter listened to Quinn's provocations with a cryptic smile. He dialed my number again. The phone rang and rang unanswered. His brow furrowed deeper with each missed call. Quinn smirked, adding fuel to the fire. "Wow, Peter, she's really ignoring you. Lily's getting bold, huh?" Since the day we got together, I had never once ignored Peter's calls. So, this time, he was visibly rattled. He kept calling only for me to reject him over and over. Fueled by Quinn's taunts, Peter snapped and froze all my credit cards. Yeah, Peter, that's the way to go. Let her learn her lesson, Quinn chimed in, ever the cheerleader for cruelty. Book 2. Chapter 3. She's been living off your support all these years. Now that you've cut her off, she'll probably come begging and crying to you. Peter believed that, too. After all, over the years, I had been crushed by the aftermath of that medical accident. I had to pay an enormous settlement to the Lynn family, draining all my savings. My reputation was shattered, and the hospital reassigned me to a lower position. At most, I earned $4,000 a month. Between the mortgage, car loan, and basic living expenses, I was drowning in debt. Peter, however, had always been generous when it came to tormenting me. My life swung between moments of fleeting relief and relentless suffering. If I were still alive and had my cards cut off now, I really would have been backed into a corner. Begging him, crying for mercy? It wouldn't have been surprising. But what Peter failed to consider was that I was already dead. That isolated villa on the outskirts, with no neighbors around, meant my death would likely remain undiscovered for some time. The sheer desolation of my situation was almost laughable. Peter, along with Quinn and the others, went to a plush KTV spot. It was one of those places I had always hated him going to. Inside, the room was filled with young women vying for his attention. Annoyed, he unlocked his phone and opened my Instagram, though he had unfollowed me long ago. He scrolled through my profile, looking at my posts. For the first time, he paid attention to my feed. Only the past 3 days were visible, and there was just one post, a picture of his profile, taken by me. After staring at it for a moment, he sent me a message. "Where are you? Come pick me up." Along with it, he shot over the location. This wasn't unusual. Late at night, drunk out of his mind, he would call me while wrapped around another woman. I would drive to fetch him, only to find him cozying up to someone else at the entrance. In the car, he would gloat, telling me how much better they were at pleasing him. When my eyes welled up with tears, he would smirk, sneer, and blame me for being late. Quinn, standing by him, noticed the message Peter sent me and chuckled. "Peter, you really know how to keep control. At a place like this, and you still asked Dr. Hayes to pick you up? Do you think she'll cry again when she shows up?" "Let's time her," someone else suggested. Last time, she was 10 miles away and still made it in less than 30 minutes. Even ran a red light. Let's see if she can beat that. They all began placing bets, laughing and jeering. Peter confidently declared, "She'll be here within 30 minutes. The room burst into laughter, a chorus of smug amusement. But 30 minutes passed, and the laughter faded into an awkward silence. I didn't show up. Frustrated, Peter pulled out his phone and hammered out a series of messages. "Why aren't you here yet? Are you dead or something? You're ignoring me? Throwing a tantrum? What right do you have to act this way? Lily Hayes, know your place. You're nothing. It was your mistake that ruined Laura's life. You owe me forever for that. Laura survived because the Lynn family found overseas doctors to save her. It wasn't some conspiracy to fake her death and ruin you. But deep down, he knew the Lynn family's story did not add up. Any rational person could see the cracks in their version of events. Even so, Peter chose to believe it. He twisted the truth to wield it as another weapon against me. He waited, expecting me to break down, to show up and plead. But as the hours dragged on and the lounge session ended, I still did not appear. Frustrated, Peter downed an entire bottle of red wine in one go. Then his phone buzzed. He snatched it up hurriedly, skin prickling with anticipation. Quinn and the others leaned in, curious to see who had finally responded. But when Peter opened the message, it was not from me. It was from Laura. "Have you had too much to drink? Want me to come pick you up?" Book 2. Chapter 4. I could clearly see the shock in Peter's eyes, followed quickly by a flash of joy. His response came almost immediately. Shortly after, he sent me a message telling me not to come. Laura would be picking him up. Laura arrived quickly, driving her red sports car. She was still wearing the dress she had worn earlier for the wedding toast. The moment she stepped in, the crowd erupted with loud jeers and teasing. The bride came to find her ex on her wedding night. "Still holding a candle for our Peter, are you? Driving here herself to pick him up? Wow, it makes me jealous. No one ever picks me up like that." Laura glanced around the room, her brows furrowing slightly. "Where's Lily?" she asked, her tone curious. At the mention of my name, Peter's mood shifted instantly. His face darkened with anger. "Does she even deserve to be here? Does she deserve to see you?" Laura's eyes turned red, and her voice trembled as she replied, "Don't be like this. I know you're married now, and that's in the past for us. What happened to me, it was a misunderstanding. The part about her poor medical skills causing my death was also a misunderstanding. I faked my death. Thank goodness my mother couldn't bear to let me go and didn't authorize cremation. Otherwise, I really would have been gone." Her words were drenched in emotion, and she began to cry, leaning against Peter's shoulder as she continued. "I wanted to explain to Lily myself, to clear up any misunderstanding, so she wouldn't think the Lynn family deliberately humiliated her or caused her downfall. I truly didn't intend for that. Fake death?" I remembered the day clearly. After she was pronounced dead on the operating table, the Lynns had stormed in and physically blocked me from approaching her body. They took her away immediately, leaving no chance for me to intervene. And then, I was dragged into an investigation. If that wasn't deliberate humiliation, I did not know what was. That surgery was not supposed to be mine, but they insisted on assigning it to me. Other doctors had connections and backing. I had none. The Lynn family used their influence to orchestrate everything, sacrificing my career for their daughter's escape. It was a perfect plan, saving their daughter, avoiding trouble with the Chase family, and ruining me in the process. Peter, who was always so clever, now held Laura in his arms, accepting every word she said. I know you'd never intentionally abandon me," he murmured. Laura drove him away after that, and I had no choice but to follow them. The red sports car stopped at a hotel owned by the Lynn family. Laura helped Peter inside, and the two of them drank together. Already intoxicated, Peter soon collapsed onto the bed, tears streaming down his face as he muttered a name. Laura gently helped him out of his suit. I thought they would cross a line, but to my surprise, after removing his clothes, she simply left. The next morning, Laura returned, but Peter was still asleep. She looked visibly annoyed as she turned to her husband and said, "The whole point of faking my death was to get away from him and avoid offending the Chase family. Who knew he would still be hung up on me after all this time? He even married that doctor because of me. Lily knows at least something about my fake death," she continued. "If she exposes me, it will ruin me and the Lynn family. Do you realize how many connections we had to bribe to pull off that fake death?" Her husband smirked. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I know everything you've done, and I'd never blame you." With that, he walked off. Laura slipped out of her outerwear and into a nightgown, tossing a few used condoms into the trash before lying down beside Peter. Her words had shaken me to my core, filling me with fury, but what caught my attention was Peter slowly opening his eyes. His expression was one of shock. He had not been asleep at all. With a sudden movement, he shoved Laura away. "What are you doing, Peter? Don't feel guilty." "I slept with you because I wanted to," she said, feigning innocence. Peter stared at her coldly. "You faked your death to get out of an engagement? It wasn't Lily's fault. It was your family who framed her." "Peter, what are you talking about? I would never frame Dr. Hayes. Didn't I just explain everything to you? You have to trust me." Peter's voice cracked as he replied, "I was not asleep just now. I heard everything. How can I trust you?" He threw on his clothes haphazardly and stormed out, frantically dialing my number over and over. As expected, none of the calls went through. Finally, when his last call ended, he received a phone call from the police. "Hello, is this Peter Chase?" a calm voice asked. "Your wife passed away at home several days ago. Please come to our station to identify the body and assist with the investigation." Book 2. Chapter 5. Peter broke down, asking over and over again, unable to believe that I was gone. I found it strange, too. Hearing about my death did not seem to bring him any relief. Instead, his face was etched with grief. Was he the one who wanted me dead the most? What kind of performance was he putting on now? I stood there silently, watching him as his breathing grew rapid. He clung to the wall before collapsing to his knees. He frantically dialed my number over and over. Each time, he was met with the automated message, "The number you have dialed is unavailable." That sound drove him to tears, guttural and raw. "Peter, I'm dead. I've been dead for a long time. When you hung out with your friends, holding someone else in your arms, I was already lying lifeless at home. I'm dead, and yet here you are, acting like this. What's the point?" I wanted to slap him, to make him feel even a fraction of the anger I carried. But every time my hand swept toward his face, it passed right through. He did not feel a thing, and I was left with no satisfaction. He cried for hours. Finally, he opened our chat history. Scrolling upward, he came across message after message where he treated me like a chauffeur, a cook, or a punching bag. In every single conversation, there was not an ounce of warmth. His lack of love was undeniable. "No, it's not true. Lily, you're lying to me. You hated me too, did not you? You wanted to leave me, so you faked your death like Laura, did not you? Answer the phone, Lily. Answer me." He seemed completely unhinged, refusing to accept that I was gone. When I did not respond to any of his calls or messages, he grabbed his car keys and sped toward the hospital. The hospital was just as busy at night as it was during the day. Patients filled the halls, but Peter stood out. His disheveled appearance, bloodshot eyes, and frantic demeanor turned every head. Ignoring the stares, he made a beeline for my department. He slammed open the door to my office, only to find someone else sitting behind my desk. "Who the hell are you? And why are you in here?" His voice was harsh, accusatory. I almost wanted to laugh. The woman sitting there was Rory Lang, a doctor who bore a striking resemblance to Laura. She was the one Peter had personally promoted to take my place. Rory's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Mr. Chase, I'm Rory Lang. Dr. Hayes, she had you terminate her last week. You're the one who arranged for me to take over, remember?" The realization hit him like a brick. He remembered now. It happened after I fainted at work. My supervisor, out of pity and knowing I was Peter's wife, had excused me from duty without docking my pay. But Peter found out anyway. As the hospital's board member, he had insisted on being impartial and fired me on the spot. Then he installed Rory in my position, forcing me to write a public apology. I had stood in front of the entire department, trembling as I read my so-called confession aloud. He made me read it again and again, accusing me of insincerity. He remembered it all now. It was him. He was the one who drove me out. He was the one who watched me cry as I recited my public humiliation, and he was the one who told me to start over until he was satisfied. It was all him. Peter's voice softened, shaking slightly. Have you seen her recently?" Rory hesitated. "No, but the police called earlier and they said." Peter did not wait to hear the rest. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Deep down, he already knew the truth. But he did not want to admit it. As he walked out of the hospital, his gaze landed on the honor wall in the lobby. My photo still hung there, untouched. He stared at it for a long time. The hospital administrators must have caught wind of his visit because they quickly rushed over. Mr. Chase, we're so sorry. We forgot to take Dr. Hayes' photo down. We'll remove it right away. One of them reached up to take the frame off the wall, but Peter's voice thundered as he snapped, "Did I tell you to take it down? Leave it." And so my photo remained. He stood there, looking at it for what felt like an eternity. In that moment, I almost saw the Peter I had met years ago, the one who had admired me, who had taken pride in my achievements. Back then, as my senior, he would introduce me to everyone with a sense of pride, calling me the most talented student under our mentor. He used to be so proud of me. He was the one who patiently taught me things I struggled with, who stayed late to help me with experiments. And he was the one who, after Laura rejected his proposal, accepted my confession without hesitation. But he did not tell me the truth. He hid it from me and agreed to the engagement party his family had forcibly arranged between him and Laura. I did not even know he had attended their engagement party in secret. I only found out after the event was over, when he brought Laura to me, gravely injured, and begged me to save her. He had not even taken off his engagement suit. Book 2. Chapter 6. The way Peter cried that night made it clear to me just how deeply he loved Laura. In that moment, I realized I would never surpass her place in his heart. That is why, before her surgery, I asked him to end our relationship. He agreed without hesitation. Instead, he begged me to save Laura's life. During the first operation, I gave it my all. Laura survived, and Peter believed it was because I loved him. He lavished me with affection, acting as though his gratitude could win me over. But he forgot something important. My love for him paled in comparison to my passion for medicine and my dedication to my career. I was not saving Laura as Peter's first love. I was saving her as a patient. I rejected his kindness and kept my distance. Then, when complications arose during Laura's surgery and she was declared dead, Peter's feelings shifted. He became convinced that my coldness, my refusal to accept his affections, had been part of a calculated plan to let Laura die. "You did it on purpose," he spat at me, his face twisted with rage. "Do not think I do not know how much you love me. You loved me enough to die for me, so how could you possibly save her in good faith?" He had known everything all along. That knowledge gave him the power to manipulate me, to trap me in a twisted cycle of fear and false hope. He let me believe I was safe under his protection, pretending to shield me from some of the blame for Laura's death, while secretly weaving his web of revenge. When he proposed, I held on to a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he loved me. That this was not about retribution. But the hurts came again and again, piling up until I could no longer ignore the truth. He forced me to eat spicy foods that made me sick, all while casually bringing up Laura's name. He dismissed every attempt I made to talk about divorce, throwing Laura's death in my face, accusing me of murder. He left me no way out. I was stuck in my own private hell. I remember looking at him then, realizing I no longer saw him the way I once did. There was no yearning left, no desire to lose myself in his gaze. The love I had felt turned into searing hatred. Even in the moment of my death, that hatred burned bright. Now, as I watched him from the afterlife, I could not summon the same anger. His grief, his regret, it all seemed so absurd, so pitiful. How could he mourn me now after everything he had done to break me? Was he missing me now? Missing the woman he had driven to her grave? Just as I was thinking this, my treating physician, Dr. Marcus Hale, approached him. "Mr. Chase," Dr. Hale said firmly, "I need a word with you." Peter barely registered his presence at first, his mind elsewhere. Only when Dr. Hale mentioned discussing my medical condition did Peter snap to attention. "What do you mean, her condition? What's wrong with her?" he asked, alarmed. Dr. Hale stared at him in disbelief. "You did not know she was sick? You did not even notice how serious her condition was?" Peter froze, his mind seemingly unable to process the words. I had told him about my stomach cancer. He had crushed my pills with his own hands, accusing me of making it all up. And now he stood there, stunned, as if this was somehow new information. She was dying. Dr. Hale burst out, his voice filled with fury. She had stomach cancer, and you did not even care. You kept feeding her greasy, spicy food, pushing her to the brink. Were you trying to kill her? Peter shouted back, desperate now. You are lying. She is not dead. Dr. Hale only laughed bitterly. Not dead? She is as good as gone. And now, only now, you start to care? How pathetic. With that, Dr. Hale left Peter standing alone in the hospital corridor. He did not follow. He did not even move. I, on the other hand, felt a grim satisfaction. Dr. Hale was right. His words were a fitting rebuke. Peter eventually left the hospital, wandering aimlessly through the city. He did not go to the police station to face my cold, lifeless body. Instead, he roamed the streets, lost in his own torment. I could not tell what he was searching for until he stopped in front of a bakery. He pushed open the door, and the clerk greeted him warmly. Mr. Chase, the cake your wife ordered a few days ago is not ready yet. We are waiting on a special cream to be delivered. Peter blinked, confused. She ordered a cake? Yes, I had ordered it. But not for him, for myself. Our birthdays were only a day apart, but he had never remembered. Every year I ordered my own cake, only to watch him destroy it in a fit of rage. I do not need you to celebrate my birthday, he had snarled, smashing the cake to pieces. You make me sick. But those cakes were not for him. They were for me. A small act of defiance, a fragile attempt to reclaim something for myself. This year's cake was no different. Yet Peter, unaware of its purpose, asked the clerk to open the half-finished box. When he saw the date written on it, something seemed to click. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, scrolling through my personal details until he found my birthday. 5 years. For 5 years, he had ruined every birthday I had. And every year, he forced me to spend that day at Laura's grave, paying tribute to the woman who had always mattered more to him than I ever could. Book 2. Chapter 7. This year marks the 5th year your wife has been ordering cakes from us. It is also our bakery's anniversary, so we have prepared a small gift for you and your wife, the clerk said with a warm smile. They brought out a delicate box of pastries, 9 in total, each with a special meaning. These pastries symbolize everlasting love. Couples who eat them together are said to stay together forever, the clerk explained. Your wife once asked about these years ago. She said she wanted to share them with her boyfriend at the time, hoping they would last forever. Unfortunately, our chef had been reassigned elsewhere back then, and no one else could make them. But now, 5 years later, the chef is back, so I saved some for her. Peter listened silently, his expression unreadable. He reached out, took the box, and walked out of the bakery. His phone buzzed incessantly, call after call from the police department, but he ignored them all. As he walked, he opened the box and began eating the pastries, one after another. By the time he reached the last one, he stopped and dialed a number he knew would never connect. The automated message played, and his tears spilled over uncontrollably. Pick up the phone, he shouted hoarsely. Did not you say we would be together forever? It has only been a few nights, and now you're ignoring me. But forever was something I could no longer give him. I watched him cry, and for the first time, I felt none of the old pangs of sympathy. The love I once had for him had been entirely consumed by the torment of the past 5 years. There had been countless opportunities for him to treat me better, to show me even a shred of kindness. But he never did. Laura's fake death had bought her freedom, while my life had been destroyed in its wake. The man I once loved, the one I had poured my heart into, was the same man who trapped me in a hell I could not escape. Quietly, my soul settled beside him on the bench. His phone screen still displayed our wedding photo, but it was the one where my face was blurred, almost unrecognizable. He had agonized over which photo to use, but in every single one of our wedding pictures, it was as if I was not there. On the day of the shoot, he had even handed me a dress Laura had previously worn. When he looked at me, it was as if he was seeing someone else. Now he was scrolling frantically through his photo album, searching for any picture of me with a clear face. But there were none. Not a single one. Peter's composure was finally shattered. With a devastated expression, he headed to the police station. The morgue was eerily silent, the cold air heavy with finality. An officer led him into the room, speaking quietly. "Sir, we need you to confirm your wife's identity." Peter followed without a word. There I lay on the table, my face drained of all color, the gaping wound on my neck impossible to ignore despite the coroner's best efforts to make me look presentable. Peter stared at my face for what felt like an eternity. "Your wife passed away 2 nights ago," the officer explained gently. "She accidentally broke the fish tank at home. When she fell, the glass shards cut into her throat, severing an artery. After a thorough investigation, we have ruled out foul play." Peter nodded numbly, saying nothing. The officer handed over my belongings, including my phone. "Her death is something none of us wanted to see. But, sir, you were careless. When your wife collapsed, she was still conscious. She sent you a message asking for help. If you had seen it and returned home earlier, she might have survived. The wound, though serious, was not immediately fatal. There was a chance to save her." "A message?" Peter's hands trembled as he unlocked his phone, scrolling frantically through his notifications. Finally, he found the message, the one he had ignored. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The officers left him alone with my body. Peter grasped my cold hand, his face crumpling with anguish. "Wear the ring," he whispered. "In the next life, I will find you. I swear I will treat you well." He pulled out the wedding ring he had once cruelly removed from my finger. Back then, he had told me I was not worthy of it, that it belonged to someone better, someone like Laura. He had kept it all these years, tucked away. Now, he tried to place it back on my finger, but no matter how carefully he positioned it, the ring would not stay. It slipped off and clattered to the floor. Though it was perfectly sized for my hand, it no longer fit. Book 2. Chapter 8. Once, twice, 3 times, it kept repeating. Each time, the result was the same. It felt like a cruel reminder, over and over, telling him that in another life, I would never choose him again. In the end, the ring still would not fit. Tears streaked down his face as he wiped at them and murmured, "Don't worry. I'll take care of the Lin family. I'll deal with everyone who hurt you, one by one." But no matter what he said, the ring refused to go on. Forced to give up, he removed the chain he wore around his neck, slipped the ring onto it, and placed it around mine. He arranged my funeral and left me there, in the house, surrounded by a mourning altar that even I found unsettling. Though I knew the figure lying there was me, I could not bring myself to step forward. He, however, sat beside it the entire time, speaking softly to me. "You promised you would be the best surgeon by the time you turned 30. How could you leave so suddenly?" His voice trembled. "It has been so long since you called me senior." It had been a long time. After my surgical failure, he refused to acknowledge that we had trained under the same mentor. He even cut off my contact with Professor Thorne. My research papers were suppressed, and I could not finish my doctorate. The thought made my chest ache with an indescribable sorrow. Then he unlocked my phone. The wallpaper was of my favorite kitten, one that Peter and I had raised together back when he was still my senior. Back then, Peter had been wonderful. He once biked 12 miles to the best veterinary hospital to treat that kitten. He worried about my stomach problems, always asking the family chef to prepare meals for me, bringing them to campus. He looked after everything. I had fallen for him, deeply and hopelessly. Even though I knew he had a fiancé, I kept my feelings buried deep, never telling anyone. But why had he, while still in love with Laura, accepted my confession out of spite? Why had he treated all my love as if it were just some game? As these thoughts swirled in my mind, I watched him open my social media feed. Even I had not looked at it in detail for so long. I used to love sharing little moments of my life, finding joy in the small things. My posts were rich and full, bursting with life. Many of them were drafts I never published. Peter opened them. On the day I confessed to him, I had quietly posted, "Dreams do come true." On the day he proposed, I had written, "I hope he truly loves me." My days and nights after meeting Peter were filled with him, recorded in every post. Today, I had dinner with Peter at Professor Thorne's house. He said my notes were excellent and encouraged me to keep working hard. Peter did not become a clinical doctor. He is counting on me to succeed in his place. I cannot let him down. I have to become an outstanding surgeon. Help! The kitten I rescued is sick. Does anyone know a good veterinary hospital nearby? From the vibrant, hopeful beginnings to the lifeless, hollow end. Eventually, I locked my feed so only the last 3 days were visible. But I rarely posted, barely even liked posts anymore. Now, Peter was reading through the drafts I never published. My heart pounded. Even in death, my soul trembled. Book 2. Chapter 9. The first day I realized I liked Peter, I was so nervous. I knew my feelings would only burden him, so I kept them buried deep in my heart. Date, November 26, 2018. Peter actually accepted my confession. Could it be that he really loves me? I hope he does. I will love him with all my heart. Date, May 20th, 2019. Today, he did not answer my calls or reply to my messages. I found out he was getting engaged. I saw the person he has always held close in his heart. She is beautiful. They suit each other. But she is very frail. I will do my best to help her because if something happens to her, Peter will be heartbroken. Date, July 19th, 2019. Laura's gone, but I swear I followed all the proper procedures. I really did my best. Was it my lack of skill that killed her? She is gone and Peter is devastated. He cried for so long. My heart aches for him. Why did he propose to me? He does not love me, does he? Does he? As Peter scrolled through my old social media posts, it was as if he were watching my entire life flash before his eyes. From the hope I once carried to the despair that consumed me in the end, it was all there. I had been trapped in this so-called love, unable to break free even in death. The last post, one I never had the courage to share, stopped Peter in his tracks when he opened it. I knew what it said. I wish I could just die. That way, Peter would finally be satisfied. I would not have to atone anymore. I regret loving him so deeply back then. All I feel now is hatred. She hates me, Peter whispered. He kept repeating that line over and over again, staring at the words. Why would I not hate him? Peter was utterly broken, but just then, Laura showed up. She must have already heard about my death because she was barely able to contain her joy. When she walked in, she held a bouquet of red roses, my most hated flower. She placed them in front of my photo, looked at my lifeless body beneath the white sheet, and casually said to Peter, "Hurry up and cremate her. You do not want her rotting and stinking up the place." She smiled as she walked over to Peter. "Thank you, Peter," she said. "What are you thanking me for?" Peter snapped. Laura laughed. "Oh, I have already heard everything. They said it was a fish tank shard that killed her. What a coincidence, right? It had to be you. You must have done it to make sure my fake death never came to light." She wrapped her arms around him, still smiling. I know Dr. Hayes probably never received flowers in her life, so I bought some roses just for her. "Peter, Between her life and mine, we both know which one matters more. Is not that right? She truly believed Peter had killed me for her sake and was thrilled by the thought. But Peter pushed her to the ground in front of my body. Forcing her head down, he made her bow again and again. This is all your fault. If it were not for you, she would not have suffered like this for the past 5 years. You faked your death, Laura. You faked it. So now I will make it real. That is the only justice for Lily. Laura, you deserve this. You had 1,000 ways to walk away from me, but you chose to destroy Lily in the process. How could someone like you even exist? Like a man possessed, he slammed Laura against the wall. She let out a single cry before collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Peter calmly wiped his hands clean and laid Laura's body next to mine. Fine. I will cremate her right away. Do not want her stinking up the place. I watched in shock as it all unfolded. I saw Laura, still clinging to life, being pushed into the cremation chamber alongside me. And then she was gone. Peter, dressed in the suit I had once given him as a gift, turned himself into the authorities. As he was being led away, he looked up at the sky. Lily, it is your favorite kind of weather today. The 2 people you hated most are dead now. You can finally rest in peace. On the day he was executed, a voice called out to my soul. He wants to see you one last time before he goes. Do you want to meet him? I shook my head. Without hesitation, I followed the guide into the cycle of reincarnation. I did not look back. I did not care to know if he was sad. I was looking forward to my next life, to a life without him in it. Peter and I would never meet again. Never.
Book 3. Chapter 1. Wyatt Shaw and I grew up together. We had been together for years and were about to get married. All that was left was registering for the marriage license. On the day I was diagnosed with cancer, he came home with his lover. I want to give her a home, he said. So even when he begged for forgiveness later, I never told him the truth, that it was just a misdiagnosis. If you want my forgiveness, you will have to grow a new brain, I had said. And then, he went and made himself a vegetable. 9 years had passed. I knew our love had reached its end, but I still clung to what little pride I had left. Every time my phone screen lit up, it reminded me of how sweet that once fiery love had been. Unable to resist the longing in my heart, I gave in and called Wyatt, who so often did not come home at night. The call did not even ring for 2 seconds before it was declined. It ended before I could even let myself hope. A second time, a third. I do not know how many times I dialed. Finally, the other end answered, his voice sharp and exasperated. Sarah, what is wrong with you? The words stung the first few times I heard them, but after so long, they had become routine. Wyatt, come home tonight, I said. Before he could answer, I caught a soft, breathy sound in the background. Feminine, sultry, as if meant to steal a man's soul. No wonder Wyatt was so annoyed. I had interrupted his fun. And how could I not recognize what that inappropriate little gasp was meant to convey? It was for me to hear, deliberately. But the truth was, I could not control Wyatt anymore. The moment the call ended, tears welled up and spilled down my cheeks, dripping onto the diagnosis report in my hand. The sound of them hitting the paper felt unbearably pathetic. Once, we had promised each other a lifetime. But even love like that could not stand the test of time. I glanced at my phone, at the notifications lighting up the screen. Every app seemed to know it was my birthday today. Everyone but the person who should have known best. Then again, it was not entirely Wyatt's fault. I had once insisted we did not celebrate my birthday, and now, it seemed natural he no longer remembered. When I first met Wyatt, he was not some rich heir or a tragic genius from humble beginnings. He was just an ordinary college student. And I was just as ordinary, coming from a broken home. Maybe it was our shared pain that drew me to him. The first time I saw Wyatt, my heart ached for this boy. Looking back, maybe I was really aching for the girl I used to be. I understood Wyatt's situation clearly, just as I understood my own. That was why, every year on my birthday, I pretended it did not matter. I worked hard to make him forget it even existed. Wyatt, of course, used to see through my efforts. He knew it was my way of sparing him. And each time, he would hold my hands tightly, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah, when I have made something of myself, every birthday of yours will be a grand celebration. I will make sure everyone knows this day is special because it is your birthday. Those words, so youthful and tender, carried a conviction that left me deeply moved. Maybe it was that one careless promise that kept me holding on, that made me compromise again and again. Back then, Wyatt really did remember. He remembered every word he said, every promise he made. On my birthday, he once rented the brightest building in the city center just to display the words, "Happy Birthday, Sarah." Book 3. Chapter 2. A 24-hour birthday greeting glowing on the big screen, accompanied by a giant, pulsating heart. What girl would not be moved by such a grand gesture? At night, Wyatt would set up rows of my favorite blue fireworks in an open field on the outskirts of town. He even went so far as to buy a villa nearby, just because its balcony offered the best view of those dazzling displays. When the evening breeze brushed softly against my skin, and the blue fireworks illuminated the sky in vivid bursts, I truly believed I was the happiest girl in the world. And Wyatt? He was the boy who loved me more than anyone else ever could. Perhaps Wyatt's devotion to me was so extraordinary that even fate grew envious. By the time my third birthday with him approached, everyone, myself included, was eagerly anticipating what kind of surprise he would prepare for me that year. And then, Wyatt disappeared. As I passed by the once brilliant Jumbotron, now left bare and cycling through mundane commercial ads, an unexpected wave of disappointment swept over me. Looks like the birthday message has not shown up yet. Guess they broke up after all. See? Flaunting off your love always backfires in the end. Wyatt had succeeded in making everyone remember my birthday, but he himself had forgotten. Every overheard remark felt like a thorn, pricking deeper into my chest with each passing second. No matter how many times I called him, it was as though my voice vanished into the void. In desperation, I finally dialed his assistant, Landon Yates, who also happened to be our old university friend. The answer I received drained all the frantic energy from me, leaving only a chilling stillness in its wake. Sarah. Landon hesitated, his words heavy with reluctance. There is something I have been struggling to tell you. Where is Wyatt? His tone sent a jolt of unease through me. After all these years, Landon was not someone who would joke about something so serious, especially not now. On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. I did not press him, holding my breath as we waited in that tense standoff. Deep down, I knew whatever he was about to say would not be good. Finally, Landon spoke, his voice faltering as though the words had been clawing at him for some time. Wyatt, he might cheat on you. The sentence detonated like a bomb in my mind, scattering coherent thought into fragments. I could not bring myself to respond. My heart rebelled against the idea, flooding with countless denials. How could it be true? How could Wyatt, the man who had promised to cherish me forever, cheat on me? Tell me where he is. As Landon answered, a quiet resolve began to take shape within me. Just before the call disconnected, I thought I heard a faint "happy birthday." It might have been Landon whispering it into the phone, or perhaps it was just the echo of the bombshell he had dropped reverberating in my mind. For a moment, I wondered if it had been Wyatt's voice, swirling somewhere in the haze of my thoughts. But there was not time to dwell on it. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and urgency overtook me. I scrambled to book a flight to Lander, the town where Wyatt was last seen. Book 3. Chapter 3. Wyatt was now staying at the Starlight Lodge with his mistress, the very hotel he once said he would take me to. What an irony. When the light of the day faded, leaving only darkness, the shadows in the heart rose like a flood, threatening to drown one's sanity. I was angry, but my mind still conjured up countless excuses for him, trying to justify his actions. Across the hotel lobby, a young woman with a high ponytail clung affectionately to Wyatt's arm. He stood beside her, smiling indulgently. But he was supposed to be mine. Wyatt, the man who once held my hand and told me I was his world, how could he let someone else hold his arm like that? Wyatt, I called out, my voice escaping before I could stop it. The coldness in my tone startled even me. Perhaps witnessing it all with my own eyes was the only way to truly let go. The girl turned her head, glancing around to see who had called her companion's name. Wyatt, on the other hand, hurriedly pushed her hand off his arm. We had been together for 8 years, how could he not recognize my voice? The panic on Wyatt's face was plain, and when our eyes met, all his pretense crumbled. His gaze was filled with chaos, a tangle of emotions too overwhelming to hide. The girl, however, remained calm, almost smug. She looked at me with the air of someone who thought she belonged, as if she were the rightful one by Wyatt's side. Sensing the awkward tension, she seemed to piece together who I was and why I had come. With that, Wyatt's mistress stepped forward. She was tall, with striking curves and a youthful glow untouched by time. Her sweet, saccharine voice was exactly the kind Wyatt liked now. "Hello, ma'am. I am Lila Knox, Mr. Shaw's secretary," she said with a syrupy politeness. In that moment, I wished she was not his mistress, wished she was not my rival. I stared at her, searching for some trace of nervousness in her eyes. But to my dismay, she remained composed, her calmness rivaling my own. She had said all the right things, introduced herself as she should, yet she conveniently left out the intimate scene I had just witnessed. I shifted my gaze beyond Lila, locking onto Wyatt. He, too, was trying to act as though nothing had happened, though the panic had not entirely left his expression. "Sarah," he said, his voice unsteady, "what are you doing here?" Neither of them mentioned the scene I had just interrupted. If they had not been standing right in front of me, I might have doubted my own eyes. Book 3. Chapter 4. I could not tell whether to feel relieved or mocked when he walked away from Lila Knox and pulled me into the hotel instead. His arm slid around my waist with practiced ease, and he spoke of how much he missed me. Those sweet words, once so familiar, now felt like sharp blades. For the first time, they made my heart ache as if it might shatter completely. I could not understand how Wyatt had become this person. The charming sincerity he once had was gone, replaced by a slickness that suited him all too well now. The moment we stepped into the hotel room, I realized I could not stand him for even another second. "Sarah," he said, forcing a smile, "there is a food street nearby and a big shopping plaza. How about I take you there later?" His expression shifted instantly, the gentle mask falling away. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the twitch at the corner of his mouth seemed to mock me outright. "So, you have already been there, have not you?" I asked. He froze. Wyatt had always been the kind of man who could see through people, especially women. He knew that young women like me were drawn to the lively, unpolished charm of the streets, but could not help yearning for the sophistication of a higher life. He knew it too well, did not he? "Sarah, do not misunderstand," I said quickly. "There is nothing like that between Lila and me." I had not even accused him of anything, yet he had already started defending himself. The irony made me believe, just for a moment, that this might actually have been his first time cheating. I wanted to sit quietly and listen to his explanation, but watching his lips move opening and closing as if rehearsing excuses, I gave up. I saw it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What am I supposed to do now? The moment the words left my mouth, tears began to slide down my face. Slowly, silently, like they had been waiting for this moment. I could not tell whether they were premeditated or simply the result of overwhelming sorrow. To my shock, Wyatt dropped to his knees in front of me. I turned my head away, trying desperately to suppress the storm of emotions building inside me. But his tears, his pleading, and his seemingly genuine remorse, it all chipped away at my resolve. As he spoke, part of me could not help but hope that he might remember what today meant to us, that he would recall the promises he had made. But as the night dragged on, and as I watched him drift off to sleep without a second thought, that hope crumbled completely. He had forgotten. Forgotten today. Forgotten his promises. The pain and reluctance swirled within me as I quietly opened the door, determined to leave. But in the narrow gap of the doorframe, I saw the last person I wanted to see. Lila stood there, her posture casual, as if she had been waiting for hours. I had no energy left to confront her. I pretended I had not seen her, to walk past her without a word. But she was not about to let me go so easily. I shut the door behind me, hoping to avoid her gaze. Yet, as I was about to disappear from her sight, she spoke, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. Sarah, she said, her tone light but laced with something sharper, Wyatt and I are in love. Please, let him go. Her words made my steps falter. I stopped, frozen in place. I had never imagined that phrase let go would find its way into my relationship with Wyatt. Had our love really become a burden to him? I did not cry when I first learned of his affair. I did not cry when I saw it with my own eyes. But hearing Lila, with her smug confidence, ask me to let him go, that broke me. The tears came rushing out, unstoppable. I had to admit it. The one thing I never wanted was to become a burden to anyone, least of all to Wyatt. Book 3. Chapter 5. As all the memories neared their inevitable end, the sound of the door lock turning broke the silence. Yet, unlike before, there was no anticipation left in my heart. Not anymore. I did not even bother to turn around. But the voice that came was not Wyatt's. It was Lila Knox. Miss Nash, did you call Wyatt back for something? After all this time, Lila had not changed a bit. Her words still carried that same saccharine pretense, laced with condescension. I could not stand her. That feigned innocence, paired with the way she always spoke as though she were the rightful woman at Wyatt's side, grated on every nerve I had. Still not tired of being the other woman? I asked, my voice steady but cold. Miss Nash, what are you saying? She replied, feigning shock. Wyatt and I are in love. And let us not forget, it is the one who is not loved who is the third wheel, is not it? You were just here before me, nothing else. What is there to be proud of? Her tone dripped with disdain, her expression smug. Once upon a time, Wyatt would have leapt to my defense, furious on my behalf. But now, he did not even flinch. I did not respond. Instead, I picked up the diagnosis papers from the sofa and handed them to Wyatt. Their reactions were priceless, switching effortlessly between shock, anger, and finally, outright indifference. I watched as Wyatt carelessly tossed the cancer diagnosis to the floor. With it fell the last remnants of my love for him, shattering completely in that moment. Sarah, stop pretending. You always pull the same tricks. Anyone would get tired of it. Do you even believe yourself? Wyatt had said nothing when he walked in the door, but now he had no shortage of words to hurl at me. It was bitterly ironic. I could not blame him for not believing me, though. In the past, desperate to hold on to him, I had resorted to unspeakable tactics. Faking suicide. Faking illness. Faking pregnancy. Too many lies had made the truth seem like just another ploy. But those pitiful attempts were only born from a need to prove that 9 years of love could not be so easily erased by someone like Lila Knox. We should break up. The words came out firmly, my exhaustion bleeding through. There was no point in explaining further. I was tired of fighting, pleading, and hoping. My suggestion of a breakup made Lila visibly thrilled. She tried to suppress her smile, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her, curving into an undeniable smirk. Wyatt, on the other hand, grew livid. No. Impossible. Lila's triumphant expression froze at his words, her smile vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. She clung to Wyatt's arm, tugging at his sleeve, silently begging him not to act on impulse. Lila, I said, my voice calm, it is not that I am refusing to let you take my place. It is that your Wyatt never intended to give it to you in the first place. Wyatt, I turned to him, my tone resolute, you do not love me, and you will not let me go. Why must we drag this out until we hate each other? Where will you go if you leave me? Wyatt roared, his voice filled with a desperate arrogance, as though I had no choice but to stay. To him, I was just a woman with no family, no ties, no one left in the world. He thought the only way I could survive was by staying by his side. Once, I believed that too. With no one left to care for me, I figured there was no point in wandering the world alone. Staying with Wyatt had seemed like the best choice. But now, with so little time left, what was the point of clinging to something that would only grind the last of our memories into dust? Even without Wyatt, I could find my end in the hospital's sterile halls. At least there, I would not have to endure this bitterness. We had come together because of our shared struggles. And in the end, it was those very struggles that tore us apart. I agree to the breakup, Wyatt finally said, his voice heavy. I want to give her a home. I heard his words while watching Lila stroke her still flat stomach with a look of triumph. Book 3. Chapter 6. I suddenly understood everything. I had waited 9 years, hoping he would marry me, but in the end, it was all in vain. 9 years of love could not compete with Lila Knox's sudden appearance. At that moment, I wished he had simply told me he did not love me anymore. That would have been easier to bear than knowing he wanted to give another woman a home, the very home I had dreamed of for 9 years. After leaving Wyatt's apartment, I moved into a hospital room. From an early intervention clinic, I was transferred directly to the oncology ward. And there, during my first meeting with the oncologist, I caught a glimmer of hope. His name was on the placard outside the office, Dr. Grayson Boone. It was so familiar, like a name I could recognize in an instant. When I pushed open the door, there he was, sitting upright at his desk, focused on his computer. The way he held himself was just as I remembered, though so many years had passed. Would he still remember me? Hi, I am Sarah, I introduced myself. Grayson's eyes had not left the computer since I entered, but the moment I spoke, he froze. When he finally looked up at me, his excitement was unmistakable, as if we were lovers reunited after years apart. Before I could react, he stood and pulled me into a tight embrace, his voice trembling with emotion. Sarah, I finally found you. After all these years, I have finally found you. It turned out that the man standing before me now was indeed the same boy I had once called Brother Grayson at Grandma Ellis's house all those years ago. Growing up with Grandma, I had always been quiet, withdrawn, and reluctant to talk to others. Aside from Grayson, I did not have any friends. The other kids would taunt me for being an orphan, but Grayson always stood by my side, chasing away their cruelty. Sarah, do not listen to them. You are not alone. You still have Grandma, and you have me. I will always be your brother. Those childish words of comfort warmed my broken heart on countless dark nights that followed. But then Grayson left, taking with him the only warmth and joy I had ever known. Grandma told me that his mother had come back for him, saying she wanted to take him to the city for school. Back then, neither of us could have imagined that it would be over a decade before we saw each other again. "Sarah, how have you been all these years?" Looking into Grayson's concerned eyes, I was suddenly reminded of the way Grandma used to look at me. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that. "Grandma is gone," I said softly. "I know," Grayson replied, his voice heavy with regret. "I went back, but I did not see you. Every year after that, I returned, hoping to find you, but I never did." How could he have? Grandma had been my only family in the world. After she passed, there was no reason for me to stay. And by then, I was already with Wyatt. His presence made it feel like wherever he was, that was where my home should be. Perhaps that is why Wyatt always believed I would never leave him. After all, without him, I had no one else to rely on. "I am sorry, Sarah. I am so sorry. I should have protected you better." It struck me then how different people could be. One man apologized for the pain I had endured, even though it was not his fault. Another man, the one who had caused my suffering, never felt a shred of regret. Book 3. Chapter 7. After catching up on the years we had missed, Grayson Boone asked me to describe my condition in detail so he could design a better treatment plan for me. "I have been losing a lot of hair recently," I said, my voice soft. "My vision is blurry, and I forget things easily. It feels like my mind just gives up on remembering." "And your appetite?" he asked, his tone professional yet gentle. "Not great. Most things make me nauseous shortly after eating. Honestly, nothing feels right." "Grayson," I said, reverting to the childhood nickname I had for him, "do you think there is any hope for me?" I had come to terms with the possibility that my time might be limited. At least now, there was no one left tying me to this world. If this was the end, I could leave in peace. "Do not say that," he said firmly. "We will get the results in about a month. For now, it is just speculation. If the tumor in your brain is benign, the outcome will not be as dire as you are imagining." Whether it was the truth or just words to comfort me, hearing him say that during these early stages of treatment gave me a glimmer of hope. The fear did not seem as consuming anymore. But waiting for those final results was agonizing. My prolonged malnutrition landed me in the hospital. Perhaps it was the fallout from everything with Wyatt that had affected me so deeply. I had not been taking care of myself. I fainted as soon as I stepped out of Grayson's office. Grayson was incredibly attentive. Whenever he had free time, he sat with me during 4 treatments, walked with me through the hospital corridors, and told me stories about the places he had searched for me over the years. One day, as we passed the nurses' station, a couple of nurses were chatting, their voices carrying a hint of mischief. "Dr. Boone, is this your girlfriend? Even sick, she is so beautiful." I instinctively raised my hand to correct them, but before I could say a word, Grayson's response stunned me. "Don't be silly," he said with a smile. "I am pursuing her." For a moment, I was speechless. I did not know what to say. Instead, I let my feet carry me to the fountain in the hospital courtyard and sat down on a bench. Grayson must have noticed something was amiss. He hurriedly followed and sat beside me, his face etched with worry. His flustered attempt to explain himself was almost comical, and it made me laugh despite myself. I was not upset, not really. I was just afraid that my presence might block his chances at happiness. "Grayson," I said, turning to face him, "I have only ever seen you as an older brother. And besides, I just got out of a failed relationship. There is also the possibility that I might have cancer. How could I, in good conscience, accept you?" I do not care about any of that, he said earnestly. Before he could finish, one of the nurses from earlier came rushing toward us, her face pale with urgency. Dr. Boone, there is a patient who just fainted. You need to come quickly. The concern on Grayson's face shifted immediately to the patient. Wait for me, he said before hurrying off. Not long after he left, someone approached from the other side of the fountain, the last person I wanted to see. It was not Lila Knox's voice that reached me first this time. No, it was the sight of Wyatt. I froze, desperate to avoid him. But in the open courtyard, there was nowhere to hide. He saw me, sitting there in my hospital gown, looking as worn and tired as I felt. He ran toward me. It was the kind of urgency I had longed for in the past, that he would notice me, care for me, and come running. But now, when I wanted him to pretend he had not seen me, he came straight to me, just as I had once wished. Sarah, he said, his voice cracking, are you really sick? He sat beside me without hesitation, pulling me into his arms as if nothing had ever happened between us. His embrace was familiar, his faint concern reminiscent of the man I had loved for so many years. This was the embrace I had yearned for, but now, I wanted nothing more than to push him away. From across the courtyard, I could see the murderous glare in Lila's eyes, her rage directed squarely at me. Wyatt, let go of me, I said firmly. But no matter how much I protested, he refused to release me. Weak from illness, I did not have the strength to free myself. In desperation, I bit down hard on his arm, hoping to cause enough pain for him to let go. Sarah, He started, his voice faltering. His eyes turned red, filling with an emotion I could not quite place. For a moment, I could not tell if he was the Wyatt I had loved or someone else entirely. Book 3. Chapter 8. I was the one who said we should break up, but was not it he who stopped wanting me first? Wyatt, we are already over, I said firmly. Before Wyatt could respond, Lila once again barged in front of me. She had a knack for choosing the most inappropriate moments to play the victim, even in front of someone as sick as me. Sarah, cannot you just let us be? My child really needs a father, a complete family. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and tears began to fall, as if I was the one who had seduced Wyatt away. But I did not have the energy to argue with her. Look at me, I said flatly. What do you think I could possibly do now? Sarah, I am just trying to make sure my child does not have to go through the kind of hardships you and Wyatt have endured in the past, she continued, her tone dripping with false pity. Her words hit a nerve. It was not just the accusation that I still wanted to be with Wyatt that I could brush off. But when she dared to reduce my life, my struggles, to some sort of cautionary tale for her convenience, I could not pretend I did not understand her insult. I hated it when people treated my pain like a joke, especially when it came from someone like Wyatt, the man who had shared 9 years of my life. Wyatt, I said, my voice trembling with fury, even if we are over, does that give you the right to share my personal life with others? Was your hatred for me really so deep? I had put every ounce of strength I had left into confronting him, and my vision blurred with anger. My throat felt raw from the strain, and before I could catch my breath, I began coughing uncontrollably. At that moment, Grayson walked in. Without hesitation, he pulled Wyatt away and sat down beside me, gently patting my back to help me breathe easier. His presence was calming, steady, exactly what I needed. But Wyatt, for reasons I could not fathom, suddenly dropped his facade of the gentle, caring man. His face twisted with anger. Is it because of him? He demanded. I did not have to look up to know he was talking to me. Sarah, Lila chimed in, her voice smug, so it turns out you are leaving Wyatt for this man? I had avoided explaining myself to her before, not because I could not, but because I did not think she was worth my time. But now, this constant provocation was something I could not ignore. "This is none of your business," I snapped. "If you are going to be a mistress, at least have the decency to know your place. Besides, is not our breakup exactly what you wanted? Do not act like a victim now." I forced myself to say this, even though every word drained me. Lila's act might fool someone like Wyatt, but I was not as blind as he was. Lila's face turned red with anger, and she turned to Wyatt, clearly hoping he would defend her. But by then, Wyatt was not paying attention to her. His entire focus was on me, his mind likely spinning with the idea that I had somehow betrayed him. "Is it because of him?" he repeated, louder this time. "Is it because of him?" When I did not answer, his voice grew even louder, each word laced with desperation. "Sarah, is it because of him?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Wyatt, if you really need to ask, then I can only say that the 9 years I gave you were wasted. This is not about him. It is about you. What right do you have to question me? And even if he is my boyfriend now, that came after we broke up. But what about Lila?" I gestured toward her, my words cutting like a blade. I watched as Wyatt's face darkened further, but I had no intention of staying to see how he would react. With Grayson's support, I rose to my feet and walked away from the toxic scene, leaving him and Lila behind. Book 3. Chapter 9. Grayson, can I really take your words seriously? Faced with Grayson Boone's unwavering hope, I suddenly felt a pang of guilt. I could not respond to him, yet I could not bring myself to reject his kindness either. Facing the end of life alone, with no one by your side, is a miserable thought. Deep down, I selfishly wanted him to stay until the very end. But at the same time, I did not want to drag him down with me. "You know I am a dying woman," I said quietly. "And if there were a chance for you to live, would you want it?" he asked earnestly. "Maybe," I replied after a pause. I could take risks, but I would not gamble away Grayson's future. That would be far too selfish. Still, my indifferent answer seemed to ignite some kind of determination in him. In the days that followed, Grayson did not visit as often. The nurses began to talk about it. "Dr. Boone is really something, is not he? So deeply in love. His girlfriend's illness has him working around the clock just to save her. Even the hospital director is fed up with him," one nurse remarked. It did not take much to figure out why Grayson was not showing up. But no matter how hard he worked, some things were simply hopeless. Efforts could only go so far before they were in vain. In contrast, Wyatt started visiting more often after we ran into each other that one time. But I avoided him every single time. I did not want to spend the last days of my life tangled up in the mess that was Wyatt. Perhaps he was desperate to see what had become of me, what I had turned into after leaving him. The moment Landon Yates showed up at my hospital door, I knew Wyatt had sent him. Watching Landon cautiously probe for updates on my condition, I could not help but find it amusing. "If you want to know something, just ask directly. No need to beat around the bush," I said flatly. Ever since my diagnosis, I have preferred laying things out in the open. All this tiptoeing around felt pointless. "How are you holding up?" he asked hesitantly. "Well, how I am doing is exactly what you see," I replied, gesturing to myself. "Wyatt, he really wants to see you," Landon said, his tone reluctant. It was clear he did not want to deliver this message, but out of loyalty to Wyatt, he did it anyway. But I was not the same Sarah who easily softened anymore. "Landon," I said firmly, cutting him off. To his credit, Landon dropped the topic and did not mention Wyatt again. Instead, he spoke about our university days, recounting old memories. It was obvious he was trying to get me to reconsider, to remember the good times, and go easy on Wyatt. Still, dragging this out was not solving anything. We had been together for 9 years. It deserved a proper closure, I thought. Tell him to come tomorrow morning. I will see him, I finally said. Hearing my answer, Landon seemed torn. He had expected me to agree, but he also did not want me to compromise myself for Wyatt. Yet, in the end, he chose Wyatt. When Wyatt showed up at my hospital door, the sky was just beginning to lighten. Even though it had only been a few days since I had last seen him, he looked like a ghost of himself. His eyes were sunken, as if he had not slept in days. His beard was overgrown, as if he had not bothered to shave. But his hair, it was styled, just like he knew I used to love it, soft curls I once enjoyed running my fingers through. Not wanting to disturb the patient in the next bed, I led Wyatt to the stairwell. At this hour, no one was likely to pass through, perfect for a conversation. Just like a year ago, the moment he reached a private spot, Wyatt dropped to his knees. His voice cracked as he begged for forgiveness. In the past, I would have pretended it did not happen, continuing to live with him as if nothing was wrong. But things were not the same anymore. Lila Knox was pregnant. My time was running out. Wyatt, there is no need for this between us. It is over. What is done is done. Go live your life with Lila. You are going to be a father now, I said, my voice steady. Is it the child you care about? That child does not have to exist, he shot back. What? I asked, startled. I did not understand what he meant by the child does not have to exist. Before I could process his words, Wyatt's desperate pleas flooded over me. Where could you possibly go without me? Why cannot you just forgive me, he said, his voice trembling. Book 3. Chapter 10. The words I despised the most were the ones that implied I had no place in this world without him. Wyatt, let's part ways amicably. That is the best ending we could hope for. Why insist on dragging this out? If you want my forgiveness, you had better grow an entirely new brain. With that, I left the stairwell, leaving him behind. As I turned the corner back to my hospital room, I found Grayson Boone standing there with breakfast in hand. In that fleeting moment, as our eyes met, it felt as though all the unbearable memories from the past could finally be left behind. After seeing Wyatt that day, I did not encounter him again for almost a week. For a brief moment, I thought he might have finally understood, finally let go. But then Landon Yates showed up, shattering that illusion completely. He appeared disheveled and panicked at the doorway of my hospital room, a sight so unlike him that I almost did not recognize him. It was clear he had something to say, something about Wyatt. What I did not expect was his sudden urgency. He grabbed my hand tightly, pleading with me to visit Wyatt one more time. After he left your place, just a few days later, Wyatt was in a car accident. It is bad, really bad. Most of his body is fine, but the trauma to his head is severe. The doctors say he might end up in a vegetative state. Sarah, no matter what has happened between you two, please, go see him. He would want to see you. I could not imagine what kind of internal battle Wyatt must have gone through to end up like this. Was it really because of what I said to him? If so, then perhaps he deserved it. What would it mean if I went? I asked coldly. Lila Knox? I guessed. They are done, Landon admitted. After the miscarriage, she will not be able to have children ever again. Wyatt gave her a huge payout as compensation. Please, Sarah, he needs you. Suddenly, it all clicked into place, that haunting phrase, the child does not have to exist. Even with all the bitterness I harbored, I never wanted Wyatt to go that far. I am not going, I said firmly. It will not change anything. No matter how much Landon begged, I refused. Maybe it was for the sake of the part of me he had hurt, or maybe it was for the innocent child that Lila had lost. I would not go see Wyatt. I did not want my last memory of him to be of this pitiful, broken man. I wanted to remember him as the bright, sunny boy I met in my sophomore year of college. When Landon finally left, tears began to stream down my face uncontrollably. Wyatt was no longer my concern. Just then, my phone rang, piercing through the silence. The moment I answered, it felt as though my world had come back to life. I rushed with all my strength to the familiar examination room. "Miss Nash," the doctor began, "first of all, I want to apologize. Your condition is not as severe as we initially thought." He explained that the tumor in my brain was benign and posed no threat to my life. Still, I asked all the questions I had been holding on to. The doctor said my symptoms were likely due to emotional instability and chronic exhaustion. The intermittent vomiting was simply a result of my sensitive stomach. As the doubts that had consumed me were finally resolved, the world around me seemed to brighten in an instant. On my way out, I ran into Grayson, who was rushing toward me with evident concern. Overwhelmed by the newfound hope coursing through me, I could not stop myself. I threw my arms around him. Before he could even react, I whispered softly into his ear, "Let's give it a try." The unspoken joy between us burst forth in that moment, filling the space around us completely.